From there? Yeah, well, you're sitting in the chair where the readers sit. That's okay, no problem. You can stay there, we'll just work it out. Not a problem. Okay, so Deuteronomy chapter 8. Don't do that, please. I need to sit there and do some things. We'll stop at Sam's right now. We'll just fill in seats as they empty. Right? Good. Perfect. All right, so let's begin with, okay, so Jeff, you're not reading. Neither is Jenny, is that correct? Okay, so you guys are sitting there. Kip, you reading? Well, you're in the seat of a reader, so if you don't want to read, don't sit there. Come on up, and we'll begin with you. You get to read one of my favorite sections. Okay, we begin. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Kip, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. All right, take us from chapter 8, verse 1 through 20, the whole chapter.
Whole chapter. Guard to do every command which I command you today, that you might live and shall increase and go in and shall possess the land of which Adonai swore to your fathers. And you shall remember that Adonai, your Elohim, led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you, prove you, to know what is in your heart, whether you guard his commands or not. And he humbled you and let you suffer hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, to make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Adonai. Your garments did not wear out on you, nor did your foot swell these 40 years. Thus you shall know in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, so Adonai your Elohim disciplines you. Therefore you shall guard the commands of Adonai your Elohim, to walk in his ways and to fear him. For Adonai your Elohim is bringing you into a good land, a land of streams, of water, of fountains and springs that flow out of valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land in which you eat bread without scarcity, in which you do not lack at all, a land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills you dig copper. And you shall eat and be satisfied, and shall bless Adonai your Elohim for the good land which he has given you. Be on guard lest you forget Adonai your Elohim by not guarding his commands, and his right rulings, and his laws which I command you today. Lest you eat and shall be satisfied, and build lovely houses and shall dwell in them, and your herds and your flocks increase, and your silver and your gold are increased, and all that you have is increased. That your heart then becomes lifted up, and you forget Adonai your Elohim, who had brought you out of the land of Mizraim from the house of bondage, who led you through that great and awesome wilderness, fiery serpents and scorpions and thirst, where there was no water, who brought water for you out of the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your fathers did not know, in order to humble you and to try you, to do you good in the end. You then shall say in your heart, my power and the strength of my hand have made for me this wealth. But you shall remember Adonai your Elohim, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, in order to establish his covenant which he swore to your fathers as it is today. And it shall be, if you by any means forget Adonai your Elohim, and follow other mighty ones, and serve them, and bow yourself to them, I have warned you this day that you shall certainly perish. Like the nations which Adonai is destroying before you, so you are to perish, because you did not obey the voice of Adonai, your Elohim.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Okay, next reader, David. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless David, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, David, you're going to read verses 1 through 14 of chapter 9.
Hear, O Israel, you are passing over the Yarden today to go and to dispossess nations greater and stronger than yourself, cities great and walled up to the heavens, a people great and tall, the descendants of the Anakim, whom you know and of whom you have heard it said, who does stand before the descendants of Anak? And you shall know today that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh your Elohim is he who is passing over before you as a consuming fire. He does destroy them and subdue them before you. So you shall dispossess them and destroy them quickly, as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh has said to you. Do not think in your heart, after Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh your Elohim has driven them out before you, saying, because of my righteousness, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh has brought me in to dispossess this land. And it is because of the wrong of these nations that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is driving them out from before you. It is not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart that you go in to possess their land, but because of the wrong of these nations that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh your Elohim drives them out from before you, in order to establish the word which Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh swore to your fathers, to Avraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov. And you shall know that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh your Elohim is not giving you this good land to possess because of your righteousness, for you are a stiff-necked people. Remember, do not forget how you provoked to wrath Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh your Elohim in the wilderness. From the day that you came out of the land of Mitzrayim until you came to this place, you have been rebellious against Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh your Elohim. Even in Horeb you made Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh wroth, so that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh was enraged with you to destroy you. When I went up into the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant which Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh made with you, then I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I did not eat bread, nor did I drink water. Then Adonai gave me the 2 tablets of stone, written with the finger of Elohim, and on them were all the words which Adonai had spoken to you on the mountain from the midst of the fire in the day of the assembly. And it came to be at the end of 40 days and 40 nights that Adonai gave me the 2 tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant. Then Adonai said to me, arise, go down quickly from here, for your people whom you have brought out of Mitzrayim have acted corruptly. They have quickly turned aside from the way which I commanded them. They have made them a molded image. And Adonai spoke to me, saying, I have seen this people, and look, they are a stiff-necked people. Leave me alone, so that I destroy them and blot out their name from under the heavens, and make of you a nation stronger and greater than they.
Amen, amen. Okay, thank you, David. Okay, next up we have Frederick. Excuse me. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Frederick, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Frederick's going to take us now in chapter 9 from verse 15 to the end of the chapter. 15 to the end of the chapter.
So I turned and came down from the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire, and the 2 tablets of the covenant were in my 2 hands. And I looked and saw that you had sinned against Elohim, Yahweh your Elohim, and had made for yourself a molded calf. You had quickly turned aside from the way which Yahweh had commanded you. And I took the 2 tablets and threw them out of my 2 hands and broke them before your eyes. And I fell down before Yahweh, as at the first, 40 days and 40 nights. I did not eat bread, and I did not drink water, because of all your sins which you committed in doing evils in the eyes of Yahweh, to provoke him. For I was afraid of the displeasure and the rage which Yahweh was wroth with you, to destroy you. But Yahweh listened to me that time once more. And Yahweh was very enraged with Aaron to destroy him. So I prayed for Aaron at that time also. And I took your sin, the calf which you had made, and burned it with fire, and crushed it, and ground it very small, until it was fine as dust. And I threw its dust into the stream that came down from the mountain. And at Taberah, and at Massa, and at Kibroth Hatta-awa, you made Yahweh wroth. And when Yahweh sent you from Kadesh Barnea, saying, Go up and possess the land which I have given you, then you rebelled against the mouth of Yahweh, your Elohim. You neither trusted him nor listened to his voice. You have been rebellious against Yahweh from the day that I knew you. So I fell down before Yahweh the 40 days and 40 nights. For I fell down because Yahweh said he would destroy you. And I prayed to Yahweh and said, O Master Yahweh, do not destroy your people and your inheritance, whom you have ransomed in your greatness, whom you have brought out of Mitzrayim with a strong hand. Remember your servants, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob. Do not look on the stubbornness of this people, or on the wrong, or on their sin, lest the land from which you brought us should say, because Yahweh was not able to bring them to the land which he promised them, and because he hated them, he has brought them out to kill them in the wilderness. And they are your people, your inheritance, whom you brought out by your great power and by your outstretched arm.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Frederick. All right, Ollie. Excuse me. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Ali, who's come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Ali's going to take us in chapter 10, verses 1 through 11.
Beautiful. At that time Yahweh said to me, Hew for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first, and come up to me on the mountain, and you shall make yourself an ark of wood. Then I write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke, and you shall put them in the ark. So I made an ark of acacia wood, hewed 2 tablets of stone like the first, and went up the mountain with the 2 tablets in my hand. And he wrote on the tablets, according to the first writing, the 10 words which Yahweh had spoken to you in the mountain from the midst of the fire in the day of the assembly. Then Yahweh gave them to me. And I turned and came down from the mountain and put the tablets in the ark which I had made, and they are there as Yahweh commanded me. Now the children of Israel set out from the wells of Bnei Yaakan to Moserah. Aharon died there, and he was buried there. And Eleazar, his son, became priest in his place. From there they set out to Gadgodah, and from Gadgodah to Yotbathah, a land of rivers of water. At that time Yahweh separated the tribe of Levi to bear the ark of the covenant of Yahweh, to stand before Yahweh, to serve him, and to bless in his name to this day. Therefore Levi has no portion nor inheritance with his brothers. Yahweh is his inheritance, as Yahweh your Elohim promised him. And I stayed in the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, and Yahweh heard me at that time also. And Yahweh chose not to destroy you. And Yahweh said to me, Arise, go before the people, to set out and let them go in and possess the land which I swore to their fathers to give them.
Amen. Amen. Okay, next reader, Sam. Okay, so we're going to have you, let's do the blessing first. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Sam, who's come to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. And you get to go to my other favorite verse in this book, in Deuteronomy 10:12, and take that to, I believe, the end of the chapter.
And now, Yisrael, what is Yahweh your Elohim asking of you, but to fear Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in all his ways and to love him, and to serve Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being, to guard the commands of Yahweh and his laws which I command you today for your good, See, the heavens and the heaven of the heavens belong to Yahweh your Elohim, also the earth with all that is in it. Yahweh delighted only in your fathers to love them, and he chose their seed after them, you above all peoples, as it is today. And you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart, and harden your neck no more. For Yahweh your Elohim is an Elohim of mighty ones, and master of masters, the great El, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality, nor takes a bribe. He executes right ruling for the fatherless and the widow, and loves the stranger, giving him food and a garment. And you shall love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Mitzrayim. Fear Yahweh your Elohim, serve him and cling to him, and swear by his name. He is your praise, and he is your Elohim, who has done for you these great and awesome deeds which your eyes have seen. Your fathers went down to Mitzrayim with 70 beings, and now Yahweh your Elohim has made you as numerous as the stars of the heavens.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Okay. Next up, Tawny. And we do have some empty seats that we need to get filled in. We've got a couple of seats there. We got, let's see, 4 more empty seats over there. All right, Steve, you're number 4. Go right, sit in there. You're perfect. Excuse me. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Tawny, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Amen. Okay, Tawny now is going to take us into chapter 11 and read verses 1 through 15.
And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim and guard his charge, even his laws and his right rulings and his commands always. And you shall know today, for it is not your children who have not known and who have not seen the discipline of Yahweh your Elohim, his greatness, his strong hand and his outstretched arm, and his signs and his works which he had done in the midst of Mitzrayim, to Pharaoh, sovereign of Mitzrayim, and to all his land, and that which he had done to the army of Mitzrayim, to their horses and their chariots, when he made the waters of the sea of reeds overflow them as they pursued you, and how Yahweh has destroyed them to this day, and what he had done for you in the wilderness till you came to this place, and what he had done to Dathan and Abiram and sons of Eliab, son of Reuben, when the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, and their households and their tents, and all the living creatures that were in their possession in the midst of all Israel. For yours are the eyes that saw all the great work of Yahweh which he did, and you shall guard every command which I command you today, so that you are strong and shall go in and shall possess the land which you are passing over to possess, and to prolong your days in the land which Yahweh swore to give your fathers, to them and their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey. For the land which you are going in to possess is not like the land of Mitzrayim, for which you have come, where you sowed your seed and watered it by foot as a vegetable garden. But the land which you are passing over to possess is a land of hills and valleys, which drinks water from the rain of the heavens, and a land which Yahweh your Elohim looks after. The eyes of Yahweh your Elohim are always on it from the beginning of the year to the latter end of the year. And it shall be that if you diligently obey my commands, which I command you today, to love Yahweh your Elohim and to serve him with all your heart and with all your being, then I shall give you the rain for your land in its season, the early rain and the latter rain, and you shall gather in your grain and your new wine and your oil. And I shall give grass in your fields for your livestock, and you shall eat and be satisfied.
Amen. Amen. Okay, next up we have Ken. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Ken, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Ken's going to take us through chapter 11, verse 16 to the end of the chapter. 16 to the end of the chapter.
Guard yourselves, lest your heart be deceived, and you turn aside and serve other mighty ones and bow down to them. Then the displeasure of Yahweh shall burn against you, and he shall shut up the heavens, and there be no rain, and the land not give its increase, and you shall perish quickly from the good land which Yahweh is giving you. And you shall lay up these words of mine in your heart and in your being, and you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall teach them to your children, speaking of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children are increased in the soil on which Yahweh swore to your fathers to give them, as the days of the heavens on the earth. For if you diligently guard all those commands which I command you to do it, to love Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in all his ways, and to cling to him, then Yahweh shall drive out all these nations before you, and you shall dispossess greater and stronger nations than you. Every place on which the sole of your foot treads is yours, from the wilderness and Lebanon, from the river of Euphrates, even to the western sea is your border. No man shall stand against you. Yahweh your Elohim shall put the dread of you and the fear of you upon all the land where you tread, as he has spoken to you. See, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing when you obey the commands of Yahweh your Elohim, which I command to you today, and the curse if you do not obey the commands of Yahweh your Elohim, but turn aside from the way which I command you today, to go after other mighty ones which you have not known. And it shall be when Yahweh your Elohim has brought you into the land which you go to possess, that you shall put the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ibel, and they not beyond the Jordan toward the setting sun, in the land of the Canaanites, who dwell in the desert plain opposite Gilgal, beside the terebinth trees of Morah. For if you are passing over the Jordan to go in to possess the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, and you shall possess it and dwell in it, and you shall guard to do all the laws and the right rulings which I am setting before you today.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Ken. Okay, Nate. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Nate, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Nate's going to take us now to chapter 12 and read verses 1 through 16.
These are the laws and right rulings which you guard to do in the land which Yahweh your Elohim of your fathers is giving you to possess all the days that you live on the soil. Completely destroy all the places where the nations which you are dispossessing serve their mighty ones, on the high mountains and on the hills and under every green tree. And you shall break down their slaughter places and smash their pillars and burn their Asherim with fire. And you shall cut down the carved images of their mighty ones and shall destroy their name out of that place. Do not do so to Yahweh your Elohim, but seek the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses out of all your tribes to put his name there for his dwelling place, and there you shall enter. And there you shall take your ascending offerings and your slaughters and your tithes and the contributions of your hand and your vowed offerings and your voluntary offerings and the firstlings of your herd and of your flock. And there you shall eat before Yahweh your Elohim and shall rejoice in all that you put your hand to, you and your households in which Yahweh your Elohim has blessed you. Do not do as we are doing here today, each one doing whatever is right in his own eyes, because you have not yet entered the rest and the inheritance which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. But you shall pass over the Jordan and shall dwell in the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you to inherit. And he shall give you rest from all your enemies round about, and you shall dwell in safety. And it shall be that unto the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell there, there you are to bring all that I command you, your ascending offerings and your slaughters and your tithes and the contributions of your hand and all your choice offerings which you vowed to Yahweh. And you shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim, you and your sons and your daughters and your male servants and your female servants and the Levite who is within your gates, since he has no portion nor inheritance with you. Guard yourself that you do not offer your ascending offerings in every place that you see, except in the place which Yahweh chooses. In one of your tribes, there you are to offer your ascending offerings, and there you are to do all that I command you. Only whatever your being desires you shall slaughter and eat, according to the blessing of Yahweh your Elohim, which he has given you within all your gates. The unclean and the clean do eat of it, of the gazelle and the deer alike. Only the blood you do not eat. Pour it on the earth like water.
Amen. Thank you, Nate. David. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless David, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. David's going to take us from verse 17 to the end of the chapter.
You are not allowed to eat within your gates the tithe of your grain, or of your new wine, or of your oil, or of the firstlings of your herd, or of your flock, or of any of your offerings which you vow, or of your voluntary offerings, or of the contribution of your hand. But eat them before Yahweh your Elohim in the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses. You and your son and your daughter and your male servant and your female servant and the Levite who is within your gates, and you shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim in all that you put your hands to. Guard yourself that you do not forsake the Levite as long as you live in your land. When Yahweh your Elohim enlarges your border, as he has promised you, and you say, let me eat meat, because you long to eat meat, you eat as much meat as your being desires. When the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you, then you shall slaughter from your herd, from your flock which Yahweh has given you, as I have commanded you, and you shall eat within your gates as much as your being desires. Only as the gazelle and the deer are eaten, so you are to eat of it. The unclean and the clean alike eat of it. Only be strong not to eat the blood, for the blood is the life, and do not eat the life within the meat. Do not eat it. You pour it on the earth like water. Do not eat it, that it might be well with you and your children after you when you do what is right in the eyes of Elohim. Only the set-apart gifts which you have and your vowed offerings you are to take up and go to the place with Yahweh you chooses. And you shall make your ascending offerings, the meat and the blood on the slaughter place of the Yahweh your Elohim, and the blood of your slaughterings is poured out on the slaughtering place of Yahweh your Elohim, and you eat the meat. Guard and obey all these words which I command you, that it might be well with you and your children after you forever, when you do what is good in the right of the eyes of Elohim, of Yahweh your Elohim. When Yahweh your Elohim does cut off from before you the nations which you go to dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land, guard yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire about their mighty ones, saying, how did these nations serve their mighty ones? And let me do so too. Do not do so to Yahweh your Elohim, for every abomination which Yahweh hates they have done in their mighty ones, for they even burn their sons and daughters in the fire to their mighty ones. All the words I am commanding you, guard to do it. Do not add or take away from it.
Amen. Amen. Okay, Steve? And then after Steve, I still have 2 more seats. So we have, there we go. 2 seats. And if you didn't get to read today, we have 3 more days of readings. Okay. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Steve that's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. All right, Steve, take us into chapter 13 and read verses 1 through 18. That's the whole chapter.
Okay. All right. And when there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he shall give you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder shall come true, of which he has spoken to you, saying, Let us go after other mighty ones which you have not known, and serve them. Do not listen to the word of that prophet, or the dreamer of dreams, or Yahweh your Elohim is trying to trying you to know whether you love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being. Walk after Yahweh your Elohim with all your fear. Walk after Yahweh your Elohim and fear him and guard his commands and obey his voice and serve him and cling to him. And that prophet or dreamer of dreams is to put to death, because he is spoken I can't say the word, apostasy against Yahweh, your Elohim, who has brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim and has ransomed you from the house of bondage to make you astray from the way which Yahweh your Elohim commanded you to walk. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst, and you, your brothers, and your sons of your mother, and your sons of your daughter, and your wife of your bosom, and your friend of whom as your own being entices you secretly, saying, let's go and serve other mighty ones which you have not known, neither you nor your fathers, and other mighty ones of people which are all around you, near to you or far off from you, from the end of the earth to the end of the earth. Do not agree with him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pardon him, nor spare him or conceal him. But you shall certainly kill him. Your hand is the first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people, and you shall stone him with stones until he dies, because he has sought to entice you away from Yahweh, your Elohim, who has brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim from the house of bondage. And let all Israel hear and fear, and not again do any such evil matter as this is in your midst. And when you hear someone in one of your own cities which Yahweh your Elohim gives you to dwell in, saying, some men, sons of Bethiel, have gone out of your midst and led the inhabitants of the cities astray, saying, let's go and serve other mighty ones whom you have not known. Then they shall inquire, search out, and ask diligently, and see if the matter is true, and establish that the abomination was done in your midst. You shall certainly strike the inhabitants of the city with the edge of the sword, and putting it under the ban, and let all that is in its livestock with the edge of the sword, and gather all its plunder into the middle of the street, and completely burn it with fire, and that the city and that all its plunder before Yahweh your Elohim, and it shall be a heap forever, and never to be built on again. And none of which is put under the ban is to cling to your hand, so that Yahweh turns from the fierceness of his displeasure, and shall show you compassion, love, and increase you as he has sworn to his fathers. When you obey his voice, of the voice of Yahweh your Elohim, to guard, to do his commands, which I command you today, to do what is right in the eyes of your Elohim.
Amen. Amen. All right. Tamara. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Tamara, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Tamara is going to take us into chapter 14 and read verses 1 through 20.
You are the children of Yahweh, your Elohim. Do not cut yourself, nor shave the front of your head for the dead. For you are set-apart people to Yahweh, your Elohim. And Yahweh has chosen you to be the people for himself, a treasured possession above all peoples who are on the face of the earth. Do not eat whatever is abominable. These are the living creatures which you do eat, ox, sheep, and goat, deer and gazelle, roebuck, a wild goat, a mountain goat, an antelope, a mountain sheep, and every beast that has a split hoof divided in two, chewing the cud among the beasts you do eat. But those chewing the cud, or those having a split hoof completely divided, you do not eat, such as these, the camel, the hare, the rabbit, for they chew the cud, but they do not have a split hoof. They are unclean for you. And the pig is unclean for you because it has a split hoof, but does not chew the cud. You do not eat their flesh or touch their dead carcasses. These you do eat of all that are in the waters. All that have fins and scales you do eat. And whatever does not have fins and scales you do not eat. It is unclean for you. The clean bird you do eat, but these you do not eat. The eagle, the vulture, the black vulture, and the red kite, and the falcon, and the buzzard after their kinds, and every raven after its kind, and the ostrich, and the night hawk, and the seagull, and the hawk after their kinds, and the little owl, and the great owl, and the white owl, and the pelican, and the carrion vulture, and the fisher owl, and the stork, and the heron after its kind, and the hoopoe, and the bat. And every creeping insect that flies is unclean for you. They are not eaten. Any clean bird you do eat.
Amen. Amen. Okay, and our last reader. Okay. And Becky's going to finish this off today. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Becky, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Becky, go ahead and take us from verse 21 to the end of chapter 14.
You are not to eat any animal that dies naturally, although you may let your stranger staying with you eat it, or sell it to any foreigner, because you are a holy people for Adonai your Elohim. You are not to boil a young animal in its mother's milk. Every year you must take 1/10 of everything your seed produces in the field, and eat it in the presence of Adonai your Elohim, in the place where he chooses to have his name live with you. Will you eat the 10th of your grain, new wine, olive oil, and the firstborn of your cattle and sheep, so that you will learn to fear Adonai, your Elohim, always. But if the distance is too great for you, so that you are unable to transport it, because the place where Adonai chooses to put his name is too far away from you, then when Adonai, your Elohim, prospers you, you are to convert it into money. Take the money with you. Go to the place where Adonai, your Elohim, will choose, and exchange the money for anything you want, cattle, sheep, wine, other intoxicating liquor, or anything you please. And you are to eat there in the presence of Adonai, your Elohim, and enjoy yourselves, and you and your household. But don't neglect the Levi staying with you, because he has no share of the inheritance like you. At the end of every 3 years, you are to take all the 10ths of your produce from that year and store it in your towns. When the Levi, because he has no share to the inheritance like yours, along with your foreigner and the orphan and the widow living in your towns, will come and eat and be satisfied, so that Adonai, your Elohim, will bless you in everything your hands produce. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Wow, that's good stuff. Let's pray. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, Father, we have heard your word spoken, and we're going to get into a discussion here about your word. And we ask that you would bless us or continue to bless us after the hearing of the word, that we would get able to look at the word and see how it applies to us in our lives. To look for the application to the words that we read in the things that we experience and in our own growth, so that we can become more readily transformed into the image of Yeshua. So, Father, we thank you for your word. It is such a blessing to us. We delight in it, we appreciate it, and we want to thank you and give you glory and honor in the name of Yeshua. Amen. Amen. Okay, let's take a 3 to 5 minute quick break and then come right back in here and we'll start the discussion. You want me still using this one? Or do you want me to use the wired and take two around? This one's good? Or do you want me to use the wired and take two around? Well, we got a lot of people. Might be faster. Okay, welcome back. All right, so important announcement, and it's not for you guys. You guys are good. For all of you on the property that are watching on live stream, yeah, ooh, oh, ooh, boo. Shame on you. But you're also killing the bandwidth and making the live stream not work. So if you're on property, you might even be frustrated that your live stream isn't working, which is kind of a bizarre thought when you could actually just walk a little bit and be in here live with everybody. So let's make sure that anybody that is hearing this on live stream anywhere on property turns off their phone or tablet and comes to the building. Here's the sad part. We've got over, we've got over, I don't know, how many computers you got logged on to the live stream? Okay, before the buffering, we had over 112. I promise you those 112 would rather be sitting right in here than on the live stream. So I just can't imagine why you would be sitting anywhere but in this room. You came all this way to be here. And by the way, I'm looking out at the room right now. Not all of you were here during the readings. So before you all get excited and booing those guys, where were you? Yeah, all of a sudden, different group of people are laughing. Because I've been looking from the stage out. It wasn't this full. Some of you are thinking, man, this guy's been scolding us since we got here. It's part of the job. You know, I'm sorry. You know, Abba says he disciplines us like a father who loves his children. Well, guess what? The leadership loves the people too. We want you to be blessed and be successful in this walk and be pleasing in his sight. And sometimes that requires a little bit of corrective instruction. The problem is, it says also in Scripture, nobody likes correction while they're getting it. But maybe later they'll see that it was necessary and helpful. Okay, so I'm sorry if you feel like maybe you're getting too much of that, but you may want to be asking the better question is, why are you getting so much of that? Just a thought. Because there's either two questions. Either the rabbi's just an obnoxious, picky jerk, or maybe you're doing things that you're paying only attention to your own interests and not paying attention to what everybody else is doing. And so there needs to be correction. Okay? So this is important that because look, I don't know if you've been following, I hope you've been following the words that we're reading every day, but in these readings, what we should be seeing is that Abba expects us to learn how to be respectful of authority and of each other. And that requires an awareness. I call it situational awareness. I teach my children that. You need to be situationally aware. Some things are absolutely appropriate in one situation and not in another. So the thing itself may not be the problem, just when and where you're doing it. I mean, having a great time in fellowshipping is wonderful. At 2 o'clock in the morning in front of people's rooms, which is still going on, I understand that there was one of the leadership that came out pretty much with a shoe ready to show somebody where they can have that shoe because he wanted to be sleeping and others were still making noise. And I would have applauded the shoe use, actually. I've asked you guys already a few times for that. We have to learn to be situationally aware. We cannot be just thinking of ourselves. The verse does not say, esteem yourself above others. You cannot esteem others above yourself unless you understand what they may need. What do the other people need where I could put myself below that and esteem them first and meet their need over mine? Does that make sense? Okay? It makes sense, but we don't know how to do it. Why? Because we're not aware. This is what I think has been the theme since I taught on the first Holy Day. We have to be awake and conscious and aware in order to be able to bless and serve and obey our Father. Otherwise, we just get into self mode, and I'm having a great time, and, oh, somebody's talking? Oh, I'm sorry. And we're not even listening when someone's talking. And then when we're not listening, we miss the important thing that then gets us scolded. See the cycle? And by the way, you all know what this looks like if you have children, because they do it to you all the time. Now, they don't like the correction any more than you do. Okay, enough of that. We're here to study the Word. Although I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it. Because if we don't follow or listen for instruction, you're going to miss something that will keep you out of trouble and right in His eyes. And so that's part of what we have to do with the Word. Okay, now, so we read Deuteronomy chapters 7 through 14. Okay, I believe that's what we read today, right? 7 through 14. So 8 through 14. We read 8 through 14. We'd like to go somewhat chronologically. Now, what I'd like to do is let's try to hit on critical walk of halacha type issues, because we only have so much time, and then we have to be finished. And so there's a lot of chapters here. We read 6, 7 chapters there, from 8 through 14. So that's 7 chapters inclusively. And so if we're going to do that, and we're going to start asking questions about a verse that you've always been wondering about but really has nothing to do with our walk, that's great. Ask me another time. Let's try to focus on what is going to help you be pleasing in the Father's sight. What can you take and use right now in your life? Does that make sense? Is that fair? Okay, so let's try to deal with the issues, because there was a lot of them. Okay, in Deuteronomy 8 through 14, there was a lot of things. I mean, I've got notes here from over the years that we have done these readings, and I always write my own notes and scribble them on the sheet where we do the readings, and I've got all kinds of bullet points of things that are critical to our walk that need to be covered. Okay, Deuteronomy 8 through 14. So if you have a comment or question, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and the microphone will go around. Okay, and then I'll call on you to go ahead and ask your question or comment, and then if you want to then respond to somebody's question or comment, you can also raise your hand and get involved in that. Okay, we'll begin with you, Steve. Go ahead.
All right. I'm going to start with the
You got to put that mic right up to
I'm
you.
going to start with Deuteronomy 8:2, but I want to read one.
I don't know anything about that verse.
Okay. Guard to do everything which I command you today, that you might live and increase and go in and shall possess the land which Yahweh has sworn to your fathers. And you shall remember that Yahweh your Elohim has led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you, to prove you, to know whether it's in your heart, whether you guard his commands or not. For me, that really sticks, because last year's Sukkot, my son Evan was with me. And this year, because he wasn't, I think, a big enough boy to say what he needed to say, he wasn't able to come back. But for me, it was, am I big enough in my heart to still love my father and let my son go where I don't think was good for him to go back to, and still accept that answer as a not and maybe? For me, I'm going to take a not now rather than a here he can go or a no. Then I'm going to give you what you want, Steve, no matter how much do you love me. If I have to take your son just out of the picture for right now, is it going to affect your walk with me? And it was hard, but I just pressed in, and I'm telling you, I've seen a lot of things change in me and my walk with him since then. So
Amen.
Right now it touches me real personal.
Amen. Just so it's clear for people so they understand, there was a custody issue Okay, Steve's young son, and so they ended up losing the custody issue. So the son is not with him, but was able to be with him for last Sukkot. So, and so this has been a rough time. This has been a rough time. But like he said, through that wilderness, that's Deuteronomy 8:2, right? He's letting you walk through. I think what he's talking about here is about Israel, is also about you. That you as Israel are walking through your own personal wilderness, and you should be, as you're going through that wilderness, learning what you're supposed to learn in the wilderness, so that when you come out of the wilderness, you're ready to enter the land. And I thank you for your testimony that it has helped you. It's not something that you enjoyed. It's not something you're happy about, but you're seeing that because you pressed in and because you allowed to see what Father was doing, you were able to grow from the experience, and you saw good change in you. That's great. That's a great testimony. All right, over here.
Rabbi, I wonder if you could clarify in 12:15 and also verse 22. It says the unclean and the clean do eat of it, but
absolutely.
But in 14, obviously, it goes into the differences between clean and unclean.
Okay. Now, again, remember I said that we do want to start in chapter 8, but that's not a strict rule. This is an important one that I want to cover, so I don't mind that you brought it up at this point. So in a few places it talks about. So first one's in Deuteronomy 12 and in verse 15. Okay, in verse 12, 15 says, only whatever your being desires you shall slaughter and eat according to the blessing of Yahweh your Elohim, which he has given you within all your gates. The unclean and the clean do eat of it, the gazelle and the deer alike. Only the blood you do not eat, pour it on the earth like water. And then we see this again in, where is it? 14:22. Is that what you said? No, 14:22 is talking about tithing. Oh, 13:22. No, there's no 13:22. Going once, going twice. Do I hear 12:22? Sold. No, it's Shabbat. We can't sell. Okay. When the place, in verse 21, when the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you, then you shall slaughter from your herd and your flock, which Yahweh has given you, as I commanded you. And you shall eat within your gates as much as your being desires. Only as the gazelle and the deer are eaten, so are you to eat of it. The unclean and the clean alike are to eat of it. First of all, are gazelle and deer clean? Yes. Okay, so it's not about the food. It's about the people. You see, because if you've been reading, see, this is the problem when you come out of Christianity. I'm not picking on Christians, but Christianity has never really given you a whole lot of reason to figure out the sacrificial system and the rules and gates and kashrut, etc. And so the tameh and tahor status rules, the unclean and clean, tameh is unclean, tahor is clean. If you were never taught about the state, tameh and tahor, and understanding what state you're in and what you're allowed to do when you're in either state, then you wouldn't understand that this verse is trying to tell you that while you know there are things that you can't do when you're unclean, this you can whether you're unclean or clean. Did you follow that? There are many places where it says you cannot participate in something if you are in the state called unclean. You, not the animal. And so what he's saying is that in this thing that he's describing here, your state doesn't matter. You can still eat of it. So it's talking about people, not the things that the people are eating. Does that make sense to everyone? You would miss that completely, and most of you probably did the first 6 or 8 times you read that, or until you asked a question like this, because unless you were taught and instructed about tameh and tahor, how would you know? Because you have always been taught that once you make this, come to Christ thing, or whatever you did in Christianity, there's no thought about being unclean anymore. So that whole idea of dealing with clean and unclean doesn't even register at all. Whereas all throughout Torah, you were always, going back and forth between the state of unclean and clean. Same thing with baptism or mikvah. Or actually, the Hebrew word there is tevilah. Okay? So when you immerse, you're thinking as a Christian, they only do this once. You read the Old Testament, you find out they did this all the time for changing their status from unclean to clean. And so, again, who spends that much time in the left of the book, especially in places like Leviticus, where a lot of this stuff is instructed? Because that stuff is blah, blah, blah. It's all boring. It's for the priest. They're not here anymore anyway, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, all that blah, blah, blah is really important so that we understand what he understands and wants us to know about status, the state of being unclean and the state of being clean. So if you hadn't brought that up, I would have definitely mentioned it. It's definitely starred in my notes to cover that whole section, because these are the places that people in Christianity will want to go to show, well, look, either the Torah is wrong or it's hypocritical, or, it says that you can eat the unclean right back there. It has nothing to do with eating it, because those animals aren't even unclean. You can eat them. But you can eat just like the clean can eat if you're unclean. That's what it's saying. Any questions on that? Did that clear it all up? It's a simple thing. But see, by the way, this is why, now make sure you're hearing this correctly. This is why you need a teacher. This is not why you need me, but just why you need a teacher. I happen to be a teacher, that's fine. If that's useful to you, great. But this is why it's always been designed, because how many of you are filled with the Ruach? Hopefully all of you. How many of you believe the Ruach teaches you? Probably all of you. Did the Ruach ever give you that answer? No. Why not? Just so that you could suffer, or because you're supposed to have a teacher? Do you understand what I'm saying? Because I can promise you, all those people running out there saying, we don't need teachers, the Ruach teaches me everything, most of them probably don't understand that verse. Because the Ruach doesn't teach you everything. It brings to remembrance. It is your teacher to help you to know what to do with what you know. But it doesn't necessarily reveal all things to you, because Abba wants you to be in a system that includes teachers. Does that make sense? Okay? So here's another example. Because I promise you, every single time, without exception, whether we do it during the weekly Torah portion or when we do the Deuteronomy readings at Sukkot, that question every single time comes up. Every time. So don't all those people have the Ruach? Isn't the Ruach teaching them everything? It's not the way it works, which is why I encourage all of you to listen to the teaching, Understanding the Ruach, so you understand what the Ruach actually does. And I'm not insulting the Ruach. I'm not diminishing the incredibly important role that the Ruach plays. But there's a reason why you ask questions of teachers, and the Ruach hasn't given you those answers yet, because you're supposed to have teachers. And so let that be something that you can take back and meditate on and think about. Now, of course, your responsibility is to go find you an anointed, appointed one. Not just take any teacher that claims to be a person who claims to be a teacher, because there's more than enough of those running all over the place. Okay? You have no problem turning on the internet, putting on YouTube, and finding 5,000 Hebrew roots teachers or claiming to be Torah teachers or whatever. There's no lack of that. And by the way, do they all agree on what they teach? No? Aren't they filled with the Ruach? Is the Ruach divided? No? Then something's wrong. It could be that some of them are teaching because they have not been taught, and so they're not teaching what they should know to be able to teach. You shouldn't be teaching if you're not taught. That's discipleship. Okay, that's the process Scripture lays out. Yeshua discipled the 12. Those 12 were then told to do what? Go out and disciple those in the nations. It's a process. He didn't say, go let them know the good news. The Ruach is now here. Just embrace the Ruach. It'll teach you everything. Do you see that in Matthew 28? No. He says, you go because I trained you. By the way, Matthew 28 is not for all of you unless you're trained. He says, you go because I trained you, because he told it to his disciples, and you go and disciple, because that's the role of a disciple, is to become a discipler. It's a cycle. I train you so that you can train others, is what he's telling them. I trained you, now go train others to go train others, etc. All right, that was a long-winded way of answering the question, but it's a great question. Thank you. Okay, who's next? Okay, in the back or up here? Okay, Sam, and then we'll get to Hugo. All right, Sam first.
Okay, regarding chapter 8, verses 11 to 14, something at least, well, it really happened to me just before Yom Kippur, in that I realized that the Father, well, through this, the Father desires consistency in our behavior and in our walk, but more importantly, even when we get something, we should continue to act as if we hadn't got it. And a modern example would be, for instance, a job. A lot of us immediately go to blessing Him when we get the job, but about a few months in, we become complacent with it. It happened to me, and in many ways, that's part of the reason why I lost my job. Thankfully, I may have something for after Sukkot, but I mean, it was something that I really kind of needed a whack upside my head in that regard, and that we just have to really maintain that humility in that He gave it to us, and at any moment we can blow it, completely ruin it, have it taken away, and be, frankly, I mean, honestly, if I almost wouldn't be here if I didn't have that job. So it's just a matter of constant consistency, really.
Amen. Amen. So hopefully everybody's hearing that. We pray for things, then things happen. We attribute them to Yahweh, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's just time and chance. But we attribute them to Yahweh. And then in our appreciation, we become at some point complacent. We take it for granted, and then we basically start to slack to the point where we then end up losing whatever He gave us because we didn't appreciate it enough to pay attention. How many of you have, and I'm sure almost all of you have this, have something, a trinket, a book, something, that somebody very special to you at some point in life gave you, and you still know where it is, and it's still cherished, and you still have it? Okay, so if you ask Abba to give you something, and He does, why would you not treat it the same? Think about that. Okay, how's that for a picture? Okay? I know that my daughter was given something by my mother, and she knew that came from Grandma, and it was her personal piece of jewelry, whatever it was, and she really honors and cherishes that piece. It's like heirlooms and items and things, or just, something that when you were dating, you might have gotten from your spouse, who's your spouse now, you might have gotten something, and you keep that, and it's important to you. Well, what if it came from your Father in the heavens? How much more so should you cherish it? And so this is where we get complacent and we get in trouble. Thank you for that testimony. Okay, in the back, Hugo.
I think it's related to what Sam asked there. And I also refer back to Deuteronomy 8, verse 2, and other places. And I'm reading verse 2 here. And you shall remember that Yahweh your Elohim led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you, prove you, to know what is in your heart, whether you guard His commands or not. My question is, would it be right to just as fervently to ask the Father for blessings or good things, to just as fervently ask Him to humble us so that we do not forget? Because for me personally, I find that my flesh constantly confronts me with things that I am ashamed of. Thoughts of anger, fear, pride, haughtiness. So to me, it seems like to ask Him to humble me so that these things I might walk in victory against or over those things, those thoughts that come up, is actually the right thing to do. And many people have, in our group, have already said, we thank the Father for this trial and this test. So just wanting to check if that attitude is the right one.
That is absolutely correct. Look, I wish I could remember when it occurred to me to make Deuteronomy 8:2 such a primary part of the teachings, because it seems like as far back as I can remember, that was a part of what I've taught. Almost every teaching gets it in there somewhere, because to me that verse is the very simple way of understanding the whole process. You will not do the things that you need to do unless it's the things you like to do anyway. You won't do the things you don't really want to do that you need to do unless you've been humbled. It's because, and I've jokingly said, look in the mirror, and then I say, I've seen the enemy, and it's me. We like to blame, quote unquote, the enemy for everything, but really the problem is you. The enemy can't do anything with nothing if you've got nothing to work with. If you are truly humble, the enemy can't touch you because there's nothing to work with. And so that's why verse 5 is so important. He says, thus you shall know in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, so Yahweh, your Elohim, disciplines you. He disciplines you to get the humbling part done, because until the humbling part's done, he can't really know whether it's in your heart to really do the commandments or not. Because some of them you do very easily, because actually, quite frankly, you like them, and you can see the reason for them, and they make sense to you, and you're all for those commandments. But there's still pieces of this puzzle here that you're not real comfortable with. It doesn't match your preferences, and so you struggle with them because the humbling hasn't taken a full effect. I'm guilty of this as much as anybody. That's the process. He's got to break the me, I, so that it can be all him. And so, yes, Hugo, that's absolutely it right there. And that's why the Deuteronomy 8:12 and the 8:2 and 10:12 keep coming up all the time. Because he tells us that he leads us through the wilderness to humble us, to test us, to see what's in our heart, whether we keep the commandments or not. And then he tells us the process of how this all works in 10:12. And now, Israel, what is Yahweh asking of you? But to fear him. Because, see, if you're not humble, you're not going to fear him. You're fearing other things or you're self-sovereign or whatever it is. But to fear him with full awe, reverence, and respect. We did a teaching called Fear of Yahweh to explain that. To walk in all his ways. We did a teaching called Walk in All His Ways to explain that. To love him. We did a teaching called Love in Torah to explain that. And to serve him. We did a teaching called Well Done, Good and Trustworthy Servant to explain that. That's the process. And by the way, I believe, if you've never heard me say this before, I believe it's in an order for a reason. It's in that order for a reason. Because we've come from an emotional place. Did you need me for something? Okay. We come from an emotional place. Okay. We come from an emotional place where Christianity especially has taught us that we lead with emotion. You go to a meeting, a service at a church, or a revival, or a big tent meeting, or you watch a show, or whatever it is, and it generally has a theme going through it of getting you to react emotionally. Can we agree? Okay. And so they want you to fall in love first, emotionally, which is kind of like how many of you did that in your younger days with the opposite sex? You fell in love before you even knew them, only to realize that was a big mistake. Okay? Because love coming first, which is more like lust or infatuation or some other words that you can use, and you get all hyped up and excited, you don't even know what you're hyped up and excited about because you don't even know them. They just walk by and you were like, wow. Okay, but then you got to spend a lot of time with him, you're like, wow. I'm just saying. See, Yahweh wants you to fear him, have awe and reverence, walk in his ways, and then go, wow. He loves me enough to give me these instructions that bless me and keep me safe and change me from what I am into what he is. That love, I feel that love. Now I can truly fall in love with him. So the emotion is generated from the experience and the knowledge. We talked about knowledge yesterday and the day, but we always talk about this, right? It's relational. So then you get to know him. If you fear him and walk in his ways, guess what you're going to do? You're going to really get to know him. Now you're saying, wow, and you get it. See, the problem is some of you got excited about this stuff, didn't really know him, didn't know what it was all about, got all excited, then when you came to realize what this was really going to take, you were like, whoa. And that's the parable of the sower of the seed, and some of you just get blown right out. And so, because there are people that came here, hopefully not too many of you, mostly picturing this as going to be a fun vacation. And it should be on some levels. But this is a rehearsal for what we're going to do, hopefully, forever. And this is an opportunity to find out when you rub up against a whole bunch of people. We got over 200 people here. That's when you get to see the parts that are rough around the edges that don't rub up against people very nicely. About them and about yourself. Obviously, you're going to notice what they're doing more than you notice yourself. Be more aware of the other. Switch the thinking around. Try to be aware of what you're doing that may be making other people uncomfortable, disturbing their peace, messing with their fun, or whatever it is. Try to be more aware of yourself than you are of everybody else as far as what you're doing, but be aware even more about what their needs are than yourself. So have those two things going. Switch it around. Mostly we're focused on our own needs and focused on what everybody else is doing. Switch it around. Focus on their needs and pay attention to what you're doing. Did everybody follow that? Okay? Most of us spend most of our time very aware of what everybody else is doing and focusing on our own needs and desires. Well, we need to reverse that. We need to be paying much better attention to what we actually are doing and how it affects others and pay attention to their needs and desires. That will make a huge difference, a tremendous difference, hopefully, in everything that we do. Because Deuteronomy 10:12 tells us, and now Israel, what does Yahweh want of you? Isn't that a great question? Haven't you all thought that question? What in the world does he want from me? Well, he wants you to fear him first. If you haven't figured that out, stop trying to figure out the calendar and whether the earth is flat or round and all these other things. You got to figure out how to fear him first. Oh, but I got to get the calendar right. Why? Are you fearing him yet? Well, I'm afraid to get the calendar wrong. Okay? But what about truly reverencing him so that in all the areas of your life, you're putting him first? You're not putting anything else before him because you're afraid to disappoint or let him down. I've had people tell me, but you don't understand, I promised to do this with this person on Shabbat, and they're going to be so disappointed now when I don't go. Well, you also promised your father to meet with him on Shabbat, and he's going to be so disappointed when you don't go. Why is that a tough choice? Well, because he's not going to stand right in front of you and look you in the eye and say, I'm disappointed. At least not today he's not. One day he will. But your friend's going to get right in your face. Your family member's going to get right in your face and say, you hurt me. I'm offended. They're not going to speak to you again for a while, whatever it is. And that's so much more real to you. That's the problem. How do you get him to be more real to you? That's the walk in all his ways. If you start off fearing him, even if it's just literally a trembling fear to realize I better do what he says. That's how parents start with children. You better just do what I say. Well, I don't understand. You don't need to understand. It's because I said so. By the way, the whole covenant is because I said so. You think you made that up? No, Yahweh said, if you do what I say, just because I said so, I will accept you as my people. Yahweh never says that I have to explain anything to you or that you have to agree with it. You are agreeing to do whatever I say just because I'm the one saying it. Isn't that what we try to do with our children? You need to do this because I'm the one saying it. I don't have to explain to you why I know this will keep you safe and bless you and help you grow into what you're supposed to be. Parents are supposed to do the same thing Yahweh does. Make sure the child understands that if you follow my instructions, you will be blessed, you will be safe, and you will grow into what you're supposed to be. That make sense? All right, that was my mini sermon for the day. Now I don't have to give you one later during services. Okay, Kurt?
All right, this comes from Deuteronomy 13:6. It says, if someone tries to get me away from Torah, Yahweh says we would kill that person. What do we do with that?
No, look, I have that in my notes as one to make sure to cover. It's a good question. Does somebody want to comment on that? Okay, I'll answer it. Cowards. Okay. Isn't the Ruach giving you that answer? Okay. Shh. When we read Scripture, did you want to comment on it, Fred? Okay, Frederick says he wants to comment on it. We can bring the mic up to him. Let's see if he wants to say something on it. Okay?
You keep saying everything else is about.
And by the way, this was actually the note that was given to me. If you would stand when you're answering questions or asking questions, it'll catch the camera better, make it easier.
You keep saying everything else is about relationship. Kill the relationship. Let God deal with whether they're alive or dead.
Okay, I understand where that's coming from, but that's not what this is talking about. It really wants them dead. But we have to understand that process. Well, it does. He wants them to literally be killed. But how does that work? And we need to understand what Deuteronomy 13 is saying. Do you want to get on it, Nate? Okay, Nate. Give it a shot. Why not?
First off, there's no temple. Second off, there isn't an established leadership government that is an authority to make right rulings and judgments in those cases, and it's thoroughly investigated by those who are in authority before any of that comes to fruition about how to deal with the situation. And the witnesses, you got to have all of the parameters in order to make that accusation before you can even bring it to the Sanhedrin or the governing body.
Good job. Ken, did you want to jump in there? Or are you just going to say what Nate said?
Yeah, it's just basically that it's a judicial issue, and there's no Torah observant judicial system.
Okay, judicial issue. Okay, so we're getting all the right pieces. I'm just going to wrap them up into a package. Delwy, come here for a second and just grab my phone so I can have a clock here. Thank you. Otherwise, I won't know how close we are to being late to whatever we're supposed to do next. All right, thank you. All right. Well, I know we're going to be late because I'm always late. But, hey, I need to know how close I am to being late. Shh. Okay. Let's understand that all law, everywhere, anywhere you go, any country, any county, any city, federal, it doesn't matter, wherever you live, provincial, all law has parts of that have to do with jurisdiction. In other words, there are parameters that are connected to that law. In other words, the law can only be applied if certain things are in place. Okay, if you see somebody running a stop sign, can you really go ahead and fine them? No, because you don't have the authority or jurisdiction to give them a ticket. Okay? And so what we're talking about here is when you read this verse, it continues and says that this person shall certainly kill him. And then it says, your hand is first against him to put him to death, afterward the hand of all the people, and you shall stone him with stones until he dies. So, Frederick, I'm sorry, but they really want to get this guy dead. Now, okay? However, that's in the context. Now, remember, this is Deuteronomy. This is after everything that has happened up to this point has happened. They're about to cross the Jordan. This is a synopsis of what they should already know from Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. They already should know all that stuff. And so in Leviticus and Numbers, you have instructions about what to do with people when things happen. Specifically in Leviticus, actually, and further on in Deuteronomy, we have some of these things reiterated. And so here's maybe a good time just to walk through something that all of you have heard me say, hopefully. A lot of you may not. How many of you have never heard me talk about the woman caught in adultery? How many have not heard that? Wow, good. A lot of hands. All right, so this is a good time to bring that out. Is that okay? All right. So in John chapter, 8? Okay. In John chapter 8, because I think this answers the Deuteronomy 13 question, okay? Remember what I said. There's jurisdiction, there are parameters, there are pieces of the puzzle have to be in place before you can implement a law, okay? Things like who has to implement it? Does it have to go before what authority? What about we do as far as witnesses? How does the punishment get implemented? All these things are written in the laws, okay? So here we have in John chapter 8, it says, let's see. In verse 1 and 2, you see Yeshua went to the Mount of Olives, and at dawn he came again to a set-apart place, and all the people were coming to him. And the scribes and Pharisees brought a woman to him, caught in adultery, and having set her in the midst, they said to him, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. And the Torah of Moshe commands us that such should be stoned. What then do you say? And this they said this they said trying him or testing him so that they might accuse him. But Yeshua, bending down, wrote on the ground with his finger as though he did not hear. But as they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, he who was without sin among you, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. And bending down again, he wrote on the ground. And when they heard it, being reproved by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning from the older ones until the last. And Yeshua was left alone, and the woman standing in the middle. And Yeshua straightened up, and seeing no one but the woman, said to her, woman, where are those accusers of yours? Did no one condemn you? And she said, no one, Master. And Yeshua said to her, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. Now, what have you always been taught about this? That this shows the great grace and mercy and compassion of Messiah. Is that not what you were taught? Okay, so that means, if I'm wrong, tell me, that the Christian churches have been trying to tell you that he overrode the Torah. Isn't that what they're telling you? That they says here that Torah says to stone her, and he said, oh no, you're okay. So now, is it even remotely possible that Yeshua broke the Torah? No. Okay, so we could throw that answer right out. Okay? I'm not trying to be flip about it. I'm just saying, just throw that out. It cannot be. So what's really going on here? What's going on here is that the people reading John chapter 8 don't know any Torah. Because there are all kinds of hints all throughout this little place here that we read, which is 11 verses, that give you the hints of what the Torah issues are. So what's the first issue? The woman was accused of what? Adultery. I always thought it was humorous that she was caught in the very act, and they only brought her. So what is there, a naked guy running around wherever he was, just they couldn't catch him? I mean, how fast can a naked guy run and get out and lost in a crowd? You know? But they only brought her, okay? I know that's funny, but okay, so if she was accused of adultery, it's okay, so let's say you got pulled over for speeding, or you got pulled over for some sort of reckless drive, whatever you were pulled over for, you're driving. What's important to know at that point is what the law says about that rule, right? Okay, I'll give you an example. When I was living in New York, I got in the mail and way late overdue parking ticket thing that said, a parking ticket was probably $20, $30. The fees on top of it was another $100 for being like a year late. I had never gotten the ticket. It must have flown off the windshield or something. So I had never gotten the ticket. So I'm not saying I didn't do it. I just didn't know I didn't have a ticket. I didn't know when I got that ticket. So I went to the courts, and I sat there basically to say, look, I apologize. I'm happy to pay the ticket. Can you do something about the extra fines? I don't remember ever getting a ticket. Throw myself on the mercy. The judge read everything, looked at it all, then looked up at me and said, dismissed, and sent me on my way. Now, I couldn't just do that. I had to ask. I said, excuse me, can I just ask why? Not that I mind. I'm glad it was dismissed. But what the person who wrote the ticket did not write in the place what hours between the no parking was in effect. So there was no way to know that because I was there at 11, that was during a no parking time. So the law required that. That wasn't there. They could not implement the law. That's going to be relevant to what we're reading here. So because the person never wrote down it was no parking between 9 and midnight or whatever it was, there was no way for the judge to look at the ticket and say, well, how do I know that that's during a no parking time? You didn't put it on the ticket. He's now free to go. Okay? All right. So here we have a woman that's accused of adultery. So we now need to say, what are the laws of adultery? So raise your hand if you know some of the laws of adultery. What's the first thing we need? We need both of them. Now, we're not going to pass the mic around. I'll just repeat so live stream catches that. So the law says, and I usually have my notes with all the verses so I can tell you where they are, but you can go look them up. The law says you must have him and her. So what did they do? They only brought her. Strike one. Okay, that's strike one. They're already wrong. Now remember, we'll go back to verse 6. This is the key. They're trying him. They're testing him so they can accuse him of what? What are they wanting to accuse him of? breaking Torah or teaching against it or being a false teacher to ruin his ministry. Every interaction of Yeshua with the Jewish leadership was over understanding the law so that they could accuse him, so that his ministry would be over. And if you really understand that, you can never read Mark 7 and say, when Yeshua said, thus, he said that whatever goes in is not what, defiles you, but what comes out of your mouth. He could not possibly be talking about kashrut, because if he was saying you could eat pork, his ministry would have been over. There's not a Jew of his day that would have continued listening to him. So we know that didn't happen. Even when he hinted about something that sounded like cannibalism, if you'd eat of my body and drink of my blood, a bunch of people stopped walking with him. Imagine if he said you could eat pig. See, you don't think like a Jew. You got to think like a Jew of the first century. There's no way he had a ministry if he said they could eat pork. So here we're dealing with this adultery thing. So we need him and her. Strike one. What's the second thing you need to know about adultery issues? Well, actually, before that, where is she supposed to be brought? To the leadership, which is either the priest, the king, or the judge. Okay, so was Yeshua any of those three things? No, not yet. He was a teacher. He was a carpenter. He was not an officially recognized judge or king to be making judgment. And so, strike two. They brought it to the wrong person. That's why he's just sitting there writing in the ground thinking, all right, I'm going to checkmate these guys. Let me see what's going on with these guys. Okay, what's rule number number three, witnesses. How many witnesses do you need? You need 2 witnesses at least. Okay. Now, if there are true witnesses, what gets done to the person caught in adultery? Stoning. So stoning's the right thing to do. Okay? So notice what he says. Well, actually, I'm going to backstep. So what happens if the witnesses are false? What you would have done to that person gets done to you if you're a false witness. So watch how he checkmates them. He's writing in the ground. He keeps silent. They keep questioning him. So finally he looks up at them and he says, he who is without sin among you, let him throw the first stone. Christianity has taught you, well, obviously everybody sins, so nobody could throw a stone. And no, he's not talking about personal sin. He's talking about witnesses. Because he said the first stone. Because guess what else is in Torah? The witnesses, if they're true, get to do what? Throw the first stone. It actually says that in Torah. If you are Torah knowledgeable, that verse right there would have light all the light bulbs up going, oh, he's talking about witnesses. Because the throwing the first stone is the right of the witness. So it's not about sin, like I've never sinned, I'm perfect. It's about, are you sin in this matter? Are you a false witness? So he among you who's a true witness, throw the first stone. So what did the older guys do? They figured out right away, checkmate. The younger guys, some of them probably just showed up, oh, we're going to stone somebody? They don't even know what's going on. It's sort of a mob mentality. And then they walk away and drop the rocks. So remember, law has all of these things involved. He checkmated them because they did everything wrong. They did everything wrong. They only brought her. They didn't have the witnesses. They brought it to the wrong person. They did everything wrong in this. And so then when they walk away, what does he say to her? He says, woman, where are your true witnesses? Where are the accusers? He says, to condemn you, to say, we saw you do this. She said, nobody, they're not here. He said, well, I certainly didn't see you do anything. I can't accuse you. And it's my opinion, by the way, that she never did anything. This was a setup to accuse him. Because had she really done something, they would have been obligated to take her to the right place. They would never have left her there. They left her there because she was just told, hey, listen, you stand there and be quiet. Don't worry, we're not going to hurt you. We're trying to get him. That's my best guess. Because if she truly had done it, they would have realized, well, we're not going to get him, but we still got her, and we got to take her to the place we're supposed to take her. And by the way, go get the guy we have buried away somewhere that we didn't bring over here. So Then when he says to her, what's the next thing he says? Go and sin no more. Now, did he just curse her in a way that you don't want to be cursed, to tell you, go and be perfect now? Thanks. We're the guys with the rocks. That sounds easier. Go and be perfect. Go sin no more. No, I think he was saying, go and don't let yourself get involved in this stuff again. Stand up and say no. Don't let people do this to you. Go and don't, because you allowed them to do this to you. Go and don't do this. See, but Christianity will use this whole section for grace, mercy, compassion, overriding the Torah, making Yeshua above the Heavenly Father and the commandments, and blah, 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 blah. Am I wrong about that? Isn't that what they do? Okay. But this is about the most Torah-correct, Torah-observant section of Scripture you can find in the New Testament. It deals with a very real issue in a very accurate way with the Torah command. So it's the opposite of what they use it for. Okay, so is this about the same thing? Okay, so we got a couple of people with hands up about the same thing. Where's the mic? Okay, Nate got his hand up first, and we'll walk our way across. We'll go Nate, then Kara. I'm sorry, what's your first name again? Christine. Okay, we'll go straight across.
My thought was, as you were breaking it down towards the end, when they were saying, "Let him who has the first stone, or who is the witness, cast the first stone, or without sin," would somebody who noticed that he was being falsely accused also be a witness in his behalf and be able to turn and go, "They're falsely accusing; they have the right to be stoned"?
Well, only certain. Well, yeah, there could be things going on with that as well. There are those that could be pointing. Everybody in that crowd, I would say the majority of people in that crowd had no idea what was going on. There was the few that put her there, and they weren't going to throw each other under the bus. Okay? There was only the few that brought her. They knew what was going on. The rest just kind of showed up. And by the way, if you've ever been to Israel, no problem finding a stone to throw. They're everywhere. Okay? And so, but I think only a handful of the leadership brought her there. They knew what was going on. They were not going to, break ranks on each other. They were just going to stay there or just leave. But they were frustrated because he got him again. They were like, man, he's good. But the problem is you guys were not taught anything in Leviticus in any kind of depth, and Deuteronomy where these laws are. So when you read this, man, that first stone should have told you right away, this is about the witnesses. He gives you the hints in the verse. Okay, I was going to go this way. Where's the mic? Okay, sorry. Kara, go ahead.
Okay. I'm just wondering, what exactly were the Pharisees trying to see that Yeshua would do? Like you said, they were trying to trip him up in the Torah. Did he basically pass the test, or what were they hoping that he would do in that situation?
They were hoping that he didn't understand the law enough to either A, he could have judged her without him there, being the wrong person. There's all kinds of, any of those steps he could have jumped in the wrong role of. Okay? But what he wanted to do was show them, I understand what you're doing, without just saying, he could have just said right up front, well, where's he? Okay, where are the witnesses? But then he would have been trying to almost act in the role of the judge or the king. He simply said, I know what you guys are doing. By the way, as far as people getting all speculating about what he was writing in the dirt, my guess, because some people say he's writing their sins. Well, that's actually breaking Torah. He wasn't publicly writing their sins. I believe he was writing Deuteronomy and Levitical rules that have to do with adultery. And the guys in front were going, oh, man. He's quoting the Torah right at us in the dirt. He got us. Okay? And being Yeshua, he probably could have wrote it upside down, and so they could have read it while he was writing it. Yeah, you guys can read that, right? Okay? That's probably why it took him so long, and he kept ignoring him. He said, wait a minute, I got 4 or 5 of these verses to write out here. Okay, Christine?
I just wanted to point out that the next several verses, he's actually talking about bearing false witness and other things that were related to what we were just talking about.
Amen.
So.
Scripture is all interconnected, and you have to get the full context of something. It's very helpful to keep reading. But in this case, just reading John 1 through 11, John 8, 1 through 11, you can see in that one complete package really what was going on if you understand Torah about adultery. You just have to know what the law says about adultery. And this is an important thing that we understand when we see what's going on here. It's context. Now let's go back to Deuteronomy 13. So in Deuteronomy 13, which is why we went to John 8, in Deuteronomy 13, we have the same type of situation. This is a very long-winded way of answering the Deuteronomy 13 question. Sorry about that. But in Deuteronomy 13, it says, when your brother, or your son, of your wife, or of your bosom, etc., all these people really close to you, it doesn't matter if it's a son, a daughter, a wife, etc., comes to entice you. That's in verse 6. He says, do not agree, verse 8, nor shall you spare a pardon, but you shall certainly kill him. Your hand is first against him to put him to death after the hand of all the people, and you shall stone him with stones until he dies. There's your hint that Moshe is speaking about the right of the first of the witnesses to throw the first stone. So here is someone who witnessed these people in his family doing these things, bringing them to the proper authorities, witnessing for the situation, and then if the judgment was for death, he would get to throw the stone. But there's a process. Now, just because Yeshua doesn't mention the entire, Moses doesn't mention the entire process here, because he already is speaking to an audience that should already know the process. So it should be already understood that he's not going to just pick up a stone and stone somebody. But yet he's going to have to bring that person who he's accusing with other witnesses to back it up. There's got to be at least two with him and somebody else. And then they've got to go through the process. And then if it turns out to be true, his hand would be first against him. Does that make sense? So the Deuteronomy 13 is exactly the same as John chapter 8. You'd have to understand the laws and the appropriate jurisdiction and processes necessary to implement. So who asked that question in the first place? I forgot who asked it all the way back when. The Deuteronomy 13, who had asked that? Oh, it was an online thing? So hopefully that answered the question. Okay? Okay, Kevin, did you want to say something about that? Okay, go ahead.
I just was sitting here thinking, why would the elders leave first? Why do you think the elders would have left, because they went out oldest to youngest? And I was thinking, well, maybe because they were convicted. They knew better. They knew better first. They're the elders, and they got it quicker. They got what he was writing quicker than the younger guy. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Okay. I think there was two factors. I think that the older ones were the ones that brought her in the first place, so they knew what was going on. And after what he said, they already knew, checkmate, you got us. The other older ones who were around, when he said what he said and saw what was going on and maybe saw what he was writing, they understood it too more easily. A lot of the younger ones may not have been instructed as well. And they didn't even necessarily know why. You could just picture this. The woman is brought, he's talking, and there's a bunch of people that say, oh, look, something's going on. It's a big stir. Because I'm sure as they were bringing her and putting her in the middle, this is not the first time that things like that happen, where somebody gets put in front of everybody and it's a big stir. So everybody's running around going, what's going on? And they're picking up their rocks and they're all ready to go. It was a very strange world they were living in. So I could see where a lot of the younger people might not have even understood. They were just there for the stoning. Okay? Okay, next question. Kurt, you got another one?
One more. Gary Flint asks, I noticed this
year...
Hey,
Gary.
I noticed this year that in Deuteronomy 8:3, the idea is humbling is followed by let you suffer hunger. Would the humble be the same as afflicted? So afflicting the soul is linked to hunger and fasting. But it's in Deuteronomy 8:3 context.
Okay, I'll go with that. Let me just kind of rephrase that for everybody. I think what Gary's trying to say is that he noticed that in verse 3, it says, and he humbled you and let you suffer hunger and food, but he fed you with manna. So what he's saying is that in order to humble you, he first took away your way of thinking that things should be done, your way of providing for everything, so that you could only look to him to have that provision made. And then he provided so that you would recognize that he's the provider, so that you would learn to love him because you see the love he has for you. So he broke their pride and their self-sovereignty by making them suffer hunger and need. Because when they came out of Egypt, they were whining all the time, I'm starving, I'm thirsty, I'm starving. Now, he didn't give them right away and immediately. He wanted them to get to that place where they would then say, okay, so without me, you would die. But I will provide for your every need. And when they would get complacent, he would let them get hungry again, to remind them that without me, you would die. It's a good point, Gary. That connects. Okay, who's next? All right, Ken? Oh, wait in the back. Okay, Zarek?
It was kind of more related towards what was the point before this one.
We don't go back that far. All right, Ken? No, I'm kidding. Go ahead, Zarek.
When you were talking about keeping yourself humble and just doing stuff so that because your Father in heaven said so, it just brought to mind, I think the first one in Deuteronomy is 6:2, where it talks about guarding the laws and the commands and the rewards that come with it. Just brought back, and on the military side, they train you to get in this mindset when you're on, specifically when you're on guard. You're there to guard someone. You have to have a completely different mindset. It's complete personality change. You're there because if you do anything wrong in this straightforward set of rules, someone dies. That's what happens. It could be you. It could be your friend. It could be your commander. It could be anything. And so in the military, we get in that mindset, and it brought to mind how much I get in that mindset because I grew up knowing this because my dad was in and all this stuff. So I get there, I'm on guard point, and my whole unit became like a unit task to see who could poke the button first and get me to not be focused on what I was doing first. And they were like, it just got to the point after a year of it, they were like, dude, it's not going to work. Wait till he's relaxed, off point, off for a couple hours, then you can joke with him and maybe find what things to push his button so you know what not to do around him. But
when he's on duty,
while he's on guard,
right?
It's nothing. He's focused. He'll give you a laugh about whatever you're trying to say, but he doesn't even hear you.
That's good. That's a good example. We have to maintain our focus. Okay, on this side, Ken? If that light's on, it means it's off.
Okay, so the Deuteronomy 10:4, there's the passage reads, "And he wrote on the tablets according to the first writing the 10 words which Yahweh had spoken to you in the mountain from the midst of the fire in the day of the assembly. Then Yahweh gave them to me." And so the question is Moshe talking about a summary, or was there literally only just the 10 commandments on the tablets?
Well, again, Scripture is in layers, and it's verse upon verse. We have this verse reminding them that those 10 words were on these tablets. So that's sort of that preamble. That's the table of contents for everything else. But we have other verses which say that the tablets are written. Everything that was said was written on the tablets, and they were written on even both sides. And so we have to include all of the verses. He's just reminding them what tablets these were. These are the tablets with the 10 words. Okay? These are the tablets, he says, and he wrote on the tablets, according to the first writing, the 10 words. By the way, that could also be that Yahweh wrote the 10 words and Moses wrote the rest of it being dictated by Yahweh. But the tablets, we know, had all of that on there, probably including the blueprints for the tabernacle. Okay? Because it says in some places, and everything that Yahweh says, Moses wrote it down, and it was there, and it says the tablets were written on both sides. Okay, so we have verses that have to be added together. The problem is that in Scripture, you're not going to find everything you need in one place. Abba did that on purpose so that you'd have to work for it and that you'd read everything and find what you need all over the place, line upon line, precept upon precept, and put the puzzle together. But he's expecting you, when you read about one piece, that you know about the other piece so that they can be added together. When you don't, then when somebody like me as a teacher says, oh, do you remember this? And they go, oh, wait, I didn't even know that piece was there. I've told people often, and they're like, I didn't know there was a verse that says the tablets are written on both sides. Where's that verse? Well, I don't have it in front of me, but you can go look it up. Okay? And so good question. Back. Okay, we're going to kind of toss back and forth a little bit. Richard?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I was just asking, going back to Deuteronomy when he's talking about if your
It
brother...
looks like we're wearing the same shirt almost.
I got the email.
Good.
Except I wasn't. Well, never mind. Anyway, you know when Yeshua says no one who is not willing to turn his back on his mother or father or sister or brother is fit for the kingdom?
Yep.
Is this reference that if they become an obstacle to being obedient, is that what he's referring to?
I think there would be a loose connection there. No, the thing that you mean in terms about what? In terms of when Yeshua is saying, I mean, we're talking about the Deuteronomy 13 and stoning the person? Okay. That's more connected to the verse after verse after verse of saying that if you spend time with those that are outside the camp or behaving like somebody that's outside the camp, you will start behaving like them. That goes into the do not do as they do. By the way, that's a teaching we did. Well, do not do as they do. So understand, and if any of you are new, realize the only reason I keep mentioning the teachings is not because we sell them and it's going to make us any money. They're always free. But these are teachings you can go back and listen to that give more depth on these particular topics. So there's a lot of verses about making sure that you're aware of the potential influence of people that are not covenanted. And so when they start doing things that cause problems, like trying to lead you to other mighty ones that are not Yahweh, or cause division and strife within the body, they need to be put out before they infect everybody else. And that's really more about what it's talking about here. And Nate brought this up the other day. He says, look, as a medical person, okay, because he works in hospitals, you know, it's like a cancer. If it starts to show up and you don't isolate it, completely get rid of it or whatever needs to be done, it can metastasize and kill the body. And that's more of what we're talking about here in Deuteronomy, is that this person who's trying to lead people away, and notice that he used the specific reference there of even people as close to you as your sister, your brother, your son or your daughter, your wife, your husband. Even those people are a danger to you ultimately if they're trying to lead you away from Yahweh. But yet, you'll still show up at Christmas dinner with the ham and the whole thing. You won't eat it, but you'll show up because you don't want to say no to mom, because mom will get all mad and cry. Why are you doing that? Who are you trying to not disappoint? Because you already crossed a line that's now showing a certain amount of compromise. As soon as you start to compromise, the line starts to get very wishy-washy and disappear and move a lot. You can't cross the line. And if someone's going to come in and try to lead you across the line, that person's got to go. That doesn't mean you have to kill them, but at least you need to get them, as Frederick was saying, you need to kill the relationship. Okay? That's the part we at least can do, is you need to make sure that relationship cannot lead you astray. Does not have the influential power over you that it might otherwise have had. I'm not talking to shun them. I'm not talking be mean to them. I'm saying simply be really careful that you keep them at a distance where that influence can't be there until Abba decides to wake them up. And just keep praying for Abba to disturb their peace and wake them up. Amen? Okay, back to this side.
Okay, so referring to what we're discussing in Deuteronomy 13, when we're coming out of Mitzrayim, and realizing where we were, then we enter into a place where we may have fallen under non-appointed, non-anointed teachers. And then we start to go back to the things that we picked up out of where we were, whether it was in Christianity or Hindu or whatever it was. This is going back to 7, but it's... You shall burn the carved images of their gods with fire. You shall not covet the silver or gold that is on them, nor take it for yourselves, lest you be snared by it. I know that where we came from, some of the tools that were used in worship to these false prophets that were there were elevated to a place or a status which could be considered a gold or a silver because it's important. It's one of the things that make it important.
Yeah.
How far do we take that? I know in our household, anything that is involved in worship to that false prophet, we tend to get rid of it. We're trying to figure out how to get rid of it. Is that appropriate to say, okay, that kind of worship music was to that particular mighty one? We're not engaging in that. We'll find other, okay.
All right, so let me. I'm glad you brought that up. I know that was from yesterday, and we didn't actually get there. It was very important in my notes if we could have had time to get there. At the end of chapter 7 of Deuteronomy, it talks about the carved images of their mighty ones you are to burn with fire. Do not covet the silver, the gold of them, etc. So what is this? How does this relate to you? Okay, so all of you that were Christmas obsessed and have $3,000 or $4,000 or more of Christmas stuff, okay, who then wanted to turn around and sell it, which is coveting the gold and silver, you should have just thrown it out or destroyed it. I know some people that have done firing practice with that stuff and blown it up and put it in fire, whatever they needed to do. But you see, others, but you don't understand. It's like thousands of dollars worth of stuff. Well, wait a minute. The verse says, do not covet the silver or the gold of it. Just go out and destroy it. Get rid of it. I understand. But you know what? You already spent the money. You've been living without that money all this time. Yeah, but it's going to break my heart to go and throw it out. Why? Why is your heart attached to that stuff? Because of how much money I spent. If you weren't going to ever sell it, you weren't going to ever get the money back anyway. And you probably were never intending to sell it. You're probably going to pass it on to your children, blah, 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 blah. So why is the money an issue? You weren't ever planning to get money from it anyway. But Deuteronomy tells you that stuff that was being used inappropriately should be gotten rid of and not sold. You shouldn't covet the gold of it. Okay? Is this about the same thing? No. Okay, is this about the same thing? Okay, bring the mic over here. Is yours about the same thing, Kevin? Okay, go ahead, and then we'll bring it to Tricia.
Nate, were you getting really deep and saying like even CDs and worship songs that say wrong names and say, that's a confused idea of who he is and using wrong names and you know in the root of coming from a different image of our Messiah.
Stand up.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So how deep can we go in cleansing our house with that? Because I've had the same thought as him, like books that say wrong names, books that use the wrong, I've had those thoughts.
I think that a lot of that's up to how comfortable or uncomfortable you are, depending on the thing. For example, I've got Bibles, and in those Bibles are all kinds of different things that are a mess, but I have them and keep them for when people bring up stuff, I can go and see what they're actually looking at when they're using an NIV or whatever they're using that I wouldn't use. But I have them for reference material. But that's different than saying, okay, how many of you, just to make sure, have listened to Beware False Prophets? Okay, so you haven't. Have you heard that one? Some of it. Because if you had, then that sort of makes the question easier. All right? Because I know that you have. That was actually the first one you listened to. And so that really would affect having that name and that music and not really wanting to be in that place. So those are your personal choices. You have to decide what needs to be purged out of your house. You can seek counsel about it, and I can help give you guidance about it. But we're not going to be a cultist, dictatorial, ministry. We're going to tell you, you need to get this, this, and this out of your house. I think it's safe for me to say the Christmas tree and the ornaments has got to go. But when it comes to music, books, and other things, those are things that either you're comfortable with or not, and you have to have clear why you have them and whether or not they're problematic for you. Okay, so we don't have a policy of that except to say you need to just be thinking about what you have in your house. What are you bringing in? The bigger problem, and I know Kevin brought up the idea of the names. I'm not a name-obsessed person. I'm more concerned with what does the name or what is the music or what is the wording of the message conveying. Because if you have a lot of that music you loved from mainstream contemporary Christian music, The message is Christian message. It's not the Torah message. It's the hyper grace message. It's the, Jesus did it all for me message. It's all these things that are not correct scripturally. Okay? And so that's where it becomes more problematic than anything else is you're putting that message in your head if you're listening to it. Why would you want to put a false message, a misleading message in your head? But I love those songs. I don't know how many times I need to at some point go, so what? What in the world does that have to do with anything? Where in Scripture does it say, you have to obey me unless it's something you love? I mean, people come up to me and they're like, blah, 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 and I'm just looking them in the eye and I'm like, so? What's your point? But you don't understand. No, you don't understand. You don't understand that you have your heart attached to things it doesn't need to be attached to. It's just stuff that you had in your life that meant something and it was important at a time and it maybe helped you through that time of your life and it had a place. I understand that. But that place is gone. That situation has moved on. You need to move on. And so that's the more important thing. The message that's being conveyed in that music. How many of you, and you don't have to, kind of give me specifics, but how many of you, if you heard a certain song, any song, just a certain song, would take you back to a date, a place, a situation? You know what I'm talking about? There's certain songs that come on the radio, and every time they come on, my wife, as if she forgets that she's never told me this 1,000 times, oh, I'm right back playing volleyball in college. That song puts her right back. And she tells me this every time like I didn't hear it already. She goes, oh, I was like, yes, I know. You've told me this. But that song has her right back because that was playing when they were practicing. Okay? Songs, music bring you to places. They evoke emotion. They evoke memories. They get you to react in a certain way and respond a certain way. You got to be really careful with the music. I don't know what to tell you what to do with it except to be careful. But it's a really good point that you brought up. But I can't give a blanket answer to everybody. This stuff is no good. Listen to it. If the message does not match what you're learning and what you know to be true, you don't need to be listening to that. I don't care how much you know the words and sing along and love the way it sounds and it makes you cry and blah, 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 blah. That's what it was designed to do. Okay? But what is it doing to you in terms of the message? All right, Tricia.
Listening to what Nate had said, it stirred up something in my mind because of the past of the involvement in music that I have. When you're looking at the tree, you're definitely worshiping with that in that season. But when you're in, let's say, the Christian worship and the instruments and the tools that you're using for that Elohim, would you not consider those elements too as idols being used for that purpose? And also with that said too, with the whole Christmas element and getting rid of the tree and things, there was a discussion that I had with someone a few weeks ago was, there's still themes that we like, for example, snowflakes or snowmen. Are those appropriate or are those still considered idols because they go with the theme of that? So a double question, thank you.
Okay, the first one I think had to do with the instruments. There's lots of verses that talk about the instruments being used correctly for praise. An instrument is just an instrument. It's how you use it, just like music. Music has a message. If the message is a problem, then the message is the problem for that music. Doesn't mean that music is the problem, okay? So let's be careful how we do that. By the way, pigs are not a problem if they're doing what they're supposed to do. Just don't eat one, okay? So just because under certain circumstances something may be a problem when it's inappropriately used. So no problem with guitars and keyboards and, it says, use the timbrel and use the trumpets and make a joyful noise and bang the drum and all that kind of, so all those instruments are fine, not just the ones listed just in the scripture, but musical instruments are fine. Well, what are we using them for? Okay, second point is not everything that's related to some of the holidays that Christianity and other places have make them things of worship. or idolatry, but they are connected to a theme and a message and an instruction that people are doing. So, if you like, I'll give you an example. My wife loves lights. She's never done Christmas in her whole life, but she loves lights. And so she found a palm tree looking, some sort of small tree thing that has lights on it, that each light looks like a flower. So it's not a Christmassy looking thing that we have in the house. That she said, I just like lights. And so we wanted to find something that was lights that wasn't connected to something. Because lights are not the problem. But what they evoke, if they evoke something. I said, well, if you're going to get anything that has lights on it, it can't look anything like Christmassy stuff. Because it will stir that thought in people, and we don't want to bring that thought out. That's the problem. Okay? So if you are a winter person, you like winter, and you like making, snow castles and snowmen and snow thing, that's not a problem in itself. But if for you that was part of Christmas, and you only connected that way to Christmas, and it's part of your Christmas rituals, and it's going to make you think in that place, in that mind, then for you it may be a problem. Does that make sense? Okay? So let's be careful that we're not just throwing out the baby with the bathwater and just saying everything is a problem, because there are people out there that see a demon under every book and under every rock and under everything, and everything is this and everything is that. And they want to throw everything out, and then you just go live in a bubble somewhere. Oh, wait a minute, there may be something wrong with that too. I don't know. I mean, we can't go there. Let's be open and honest. Here's the problem. How good are you at being open and honest with yourself? Are you going to spin what you like into being okay? That's where you should seek counsel. So the person can help you not decide whether you should do it or not, but help you figure out whether it's okay for you to do it or not. Not whether or not it's just okay to do. Because I may be able to help you figure out what your motivation is. Why is it that you even want to do it? What is it that it does for you? What's the motive behind all that? And if I can help you sort that out, then we can figure out if it's appropriate for you. Because it may be appropriate for you, but not for you. Or not whatever. Some people yes, some people no, because it depends on what it does in that case. Christmas tree is a Christmas tree. No good for anybody. Okay? Doing things with snow is doing things with snow. Depends on where you're coming from with that. Okay? It really does depend on what you're coming with that. Does that make sense to everybody? We have to just be careful that we're not becoming a paranoid, race of Israelites, this nation of Israelites that's just literally walking around in constant fear and paranoia. Do the best you can. Always get as much counsel as you can. And to keep moving forward. Okay, where's the mic? Okay, back there. We'll go back. We'll catch Amy. You'll get next. We've got to kind of bounce around.
This actually kind of goes in with the motive, but it goes back to what you were talking about, adultery. I can't find the verse, so my question is, it's a comment with a question. If there was something, I think it was Leviticus, but I can't remember it, but going back to whoever casts the first stone, is there scripture, or where is the scripture, that says if you falsely are accusing somebody, the judgment will be stronger on you? So if your motive isn't pure, the judgment's going to be stronger than you than the sin the person committed. Is there some connection with that?
Okay, when I have my computer on, I have all the verses for the woman caught in adultery thing. Ask me that again, and I'll look up the verse for you. Let's see if I can find it. It's the verse that talks about that what you would have done to them gets done to you. Now, as far as the greater judgment, that's on teachers, and that's in the New Testament. Okay? But there is the verse in Leviticus. Where? Okay, 2010 puts the woman which shall be put to death. But where does it talk about? The witnesses is on the other side of the page. I know where it is on my book. It's in Deuteronomy, I think. In Leviticus? Deuteronomy. Okay, so I thought it was in Deuteronomy. It's going to be on the left side of the page here. Next contestant on Guess That Verse. No, that's not it. Because 22:22 is talking about, again, we're talking about adultery. We're talking about the witnesses and the judgment. So give me a second to find that. Okay. It's going to be, let's see, in 17:7, the hand of the witness shall be first. So you shall purge. So it must be previous to that. That's it. Okay, there we go. Thank you. That's where we are. I knew it was on the left-hand side of my page if we could ever get to it. All right, Deuteronomy 19:19. Listen to what it says. Then you shall do that. Well, it says, and the judges, verse 18, shall diligently search to see if the witness is false and has falsely accused his brother. Then you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. Okay, that's the verse you're looking for. 19:19. Thank you. Whenever we do Deuteronomy, I need to have my woman in adultery notes right up here so I can have those 4 or 5 verses right in front of me. You guys pulled a lot of the adultery verses out, but we're looking for the specific one in 19:19 that says, if they're false, what they would have done to the person gets done to them. In this case, stoning. Okay? Okay, so where were we over here, Amy?
In 14:28, when it talks about the third tithe, is that for the entire year or a one-time tithe?
Okay, good question, and that we're going to probably have to close the next. Well, this will take up the rest of the time. No. This is good. This needs to be done today. We have to talk about the tithing situation. It's very hard for a lot of people who are new to it to understand that there's more than one. And so we see this play out, though, in Deuteronomy in the readings we read today. Okay? So first of all, let's understand that tithing is under attack. I know this is a surprise to you. Just go on Facebook, YouTube, or anywhere. It's under attack by everybody. And it's because they don't understand it. Okay? They think of tithing as just for the Levite, because the Levite had no inheritance. So if we don't have a Levite to give it to, okay, no tithing. But yet we see that there was tithing given to Melchizedek by Abraham before there was a Levite. So what in the world was going on there? And then we see Yaakov promising to tithe to Yahweh. Well, who was he going to give it to? Was Yahweh going to come down and collect it? Or was he going to give it to a representative here? And in my research, I found that Shem, who actually, by the way, outlived even Abraham, was old enough to have been at Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's weddings, and that Shem was the one who was training the younger ones. Abraham trained directly with Noah, but Isaac and Jacob were training with Noah and Shem. Well, Noah would have passed away, but then Shem would have been training Jacob for sure. And these guys were the Melchizedek. They were the priests that were the righteous kings. They were the king priests. The Melchizedek priesthood. Now, I know there's a lot of teaching out there about this, and beware of it, be scared of it, because it is absolutely going to get you into bad judgment. Because that teaching is being used to have you do less of Torah. And that is a very risky prospect. Can we all agree that if you did more than you needed to, you probably won't be in trouble? Okay, what if you do less than you needed to? Would you be in trouble? Why would you risk that? And the people out there that are, espousing this idea of the Melchizedek priesthood being a reason to, they're using Hebrews and Galatians in very wrong and very dangerous ways to try to do away with chunks of Torah in the same way that Christianity does away with all of it. They're just wanting to have some of it and get rid of some of it. So it's kind of this hybrid mix for the one who wants to keep Torah but doesn't want all of it. And so they found a way to get rid of the parts of it they don't want to do. And so they get rid of everything after the golden calf, basically. All right? So, but we do have a true Melchizedek priesthood. We see this with Abraham. I mean, we want to figure out, well, who was Abraham tithing to? Abraham was tithing, probably that was Shem. By the way, if you go to an Orthodox Jewish bookstore and pick up anything that is teaching the Torah portions, they have these Parsha books where you can follow the Torah portions. When you get to the portion where Avram is sitting down with Melchizedek, in their books, it will tell you this was Shem. They all know this is Shem. There's no confusion in the Jewish community. They knew who this was. And so he had a role of Melchizedek, Melech Tzaddik, king righteous. And it says that they were high priest, this Melech Tzaddiks, of the Most High El. He was high priest of the Most High. He was priest of the Most High. Now, when we get to the book of Hebrews, we're told that we have a high priest, and he's a high priest, not Levitical, because we know he doesn't come from the line of Levi, from the line of Judah. And there's nothing in Scripture telling him to be a priest in the temple, and if you're not Levi. He says, but we have a high priest that's of the line, according to the order of Melchizedek. And so Yeshua is the high priest of the Melchizedek priesthood. So what do we see in Scripture? Who gets tithes? Well, either the Melchizedek priesthood or the Levitical priesthood. That's who gets tithes. And so we're told that after, and we see in the book of Hebrews when the temple was being destroyed, it was in the process of, it was imminent. That's what the whole book of Hebrews is to, if you don't even understand the context of Hebrews, the book of why it's written, you would never understand anything in Hebrews. Okay, the book of Hebrews is written to an audience of Hebrews. Boy, was that a stretch? Hey, listen, most of you had no idea that Yeshua didn't talk to any Gentiles. He's only talking to Jews. His whole life, he walked around talking to Jewish audiences. That's why it was a big deal when Kepha and Shaul started talking to Gentiles. So guess what? When we're looking at the book of Hebrews, it's actually the audience there is Hebrews, Jews. And what's going on is that they're freaking out because life as they know it, all their stability, all their foundation, which is based on the Levitical priesthood and the temple, was about to get wiped out. The timing of the book is around the siege of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. And if you've ever been under a siege, none of us has, but if you ever read about it, they almost always go the same way. Eventually you lose. And when you lose, everything gets taken and destroyed. So they knew what was coming. They were surrounded, and it was over. And so this book was written to encourage and reassure that there is still a priesthood, and we still have a high priest, and things are going to be okay. So now that being said, so let's get back to the tithing. So tithing is to support in full-time ministry either the Melchizedek or the Levitical priesthood. Just understand that. It's to support in full-time ministry. Because I don't know about you, but I can promise you from my position, I get phone calls every day at every possible hour of the day from those of you that have a need. And I promise you, if you ever thought about it, you would really appreciate that I didn't have my phone off because I was at a secular job and couldn't take a call. So I don't know that you would want that situation. Because you just take it for granted that I would be there. But a lot of people out there going, well, I don't know, he only works a couple hours on Saturday. Please come and spend a week with me. Any of you ever get an email from me at 3 in the morning? Look at the timestamp at your email. I'm still working. Any of you see me so far this week and see me still over at my desk doing something instead of sitting and just socializing? Or I'm off helping somebody or this or that? We are working 24/7, even to people in Australia at 3 in the morning. Okay? Just ask them, they'll tell you. And so understand that that's sort of the basic need. Abba understood that you needed. This is about you. You need what tithing does. It does two very important things for you. Number one, it teaches you to put Yahweh first in everything. We say this every week when we go through the tithes and the offerings. We say, Abba, we understand that the purpose of tithing is to teach us to put you first in everything. That's number one. Because guess what? What's the hardest thing to let go of? Your money, your stuff, your finances, your wealth. To give that up? I worked hard for that. I don't want to give it up so easy. Well, no, he knows he doesn't. But you're taking it from the wrong perspective. He's allowing you to have 90%. He also calls you a slave. A slave getting 90%, that's pretty good. And not only that, he blesses you with the ability to do all of that and have abundance. We read that in the scriptures today, in chapter 8. He gives you the power to create wealth. And he just wants a little bit back to support what he's trying to do, the things that the people he's working through. And the second thing that you need is someone to be available 7/24, 365. You need people to be available. Okay? Believe me, that's something you will hopefully not need anytime soon, but someday you'll need it. Whether it's to save a marriage, okay? I've gotten phone calls from a couple of marriages that I've worked with and helped save. I don't take the credit for anything, but I was there as an instrument. But I took phone calls at night, in the morning, sometimes pretty late at night. But I was there because that's my job. I don't want any praise. Don't go clapping for what I did. That's just my job. That's not the above and beyond. That's the expected job. And I have people sometimes saying, Rabbi, I just I said, I appreciate that you appreciate it, but I'm not doing anything special. It's the job. That's the job. And for that job, Abba gives tithes and offerings to allow me to not have to have another job so I can do that job. Okay? So that's number one thing with tithes. Now in Deuteronomy, we see, and we read this today, I'm not remembering where the verse is earlier on, but we read where it says, you are not to eat of it in your place. We have places that we will read and have read where it says that not only that, you bring it to Jerusalem and you go before the priest and you declare that you didn't do anything wrong with that tithe. You actually have to publicly declare that you didn't mess with the tithe. Anybody know those verses? Could you imagine how much better the tithing would be if you still had to do that? If you all had to come before the leadership and give the tithe and declare that it's all there and you didn't mess with it or touch any of it or take any of it for other purposes? That would change things a bit. So there's clearly a tithe that's for the Levite that you cannot touch. But then we get to Deuteronomy 14 into 15. Okay, so we get there. And in 14, we start to see at the end of 14, it says, and you shall tithe without fail all the yield of your grain, in verse 22. And you're going to go and eat before Yahweh your Elohim in a place he chooses to make his name dwell, the tithe of you're going to eat your tithe. Whoa, 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 whoa. Either Yahweh is confused or this is dealing with something else. We already know previously that you are not allowed to touch this, the tithe that goes to the Levite. But this one we're told as we go further that if the way is too long, you can turn it into gold or silver or money. And then in verse 26, you can spend it on whatever your being desires, whatever your heart desires, and then you get to eat and enjoy it. I don't know about you, but it seems logical this is not talking about the same thing. It's got to be something different. Because you can't tell me I have to tithe and give it all to the Levite and then tell me I have to tithe, the same tithe, and somehow eat it and buy whatever I want. You can't do the same thing or two things with the same money or with the same tithe. How can you do that? How can you take care of it, give all of it to the Levite, and still somehow take care of it and get to eat it too? It can't be done. Okay, so I believe this is talking about a second different tithe. And this is, I believe, connected, when you read the context of it, to you having abundance during the feasts, to celebrating the feasts. He wants you to travel with your tithe to the feast and experience abundance for that week. The 3 times a year that you would go, you should know what it feels like to be abundant and blessed in the kingdom. He wants you to celebrate before him and feel abundant. Because even if you are poor, if you are able to tithe, that tithe should be enough to enjoy a week, twice a year, plus the 1 day for Shavuot. I mean, think about it. If you make just $20,000 a year, that's not a lot, right? We're talking about a $10 an hour job. Okay, that gives you about $400 a week. It's a $20,000 job, $20,800. That's $2,000 for you to enjoy 3 feasts. That's pretty good. I mean, even just with a $20,000 a year job. And I'm not picking on the job. I'm just saying most people are making at least that, or have the ability to make at least that. And look what that does. You can't live for a real good time for two one-week festivals and a one-day festival with $2,000. Okay? And so you would live abundantly. What if you were making, could you imagine, what if you were making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000? You'd have $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. You'd buy some real good food. You'd stay in you're doing really nice things. You'd really be able to celebrate. More importantly, you'd probably others that don't have and take them and feel even better. So I think this is a second tithe. So that's the way I refer to it, as the second tithe, because the first one that is instructed is given to the priesthood, the full-time ministry. You can argue against that, but I can show you again my belief, when you look at it, is from the Melchizedekian received tithe, the Levitical received tithe. We're back to the Melchizedekian. By the way, I didn't really explain this as clearly as I probably should have. The roles of each are very different. What was the role of the Levitical priesthood? Judgment and temple service. Okay, they had judicial issues, judicial responsibilities, and temple service. What is the role of the Melchizedekian? Discipleship. So you see both working together actually in Moses and Aharon. Okay, Moshe and Aaron. Do you like the way I did that? I said Moses, and I used the Hebrew for Aaron, then I used the Hebrew for Moses in the English writing. Do you like the way I did that? I want to see if you're paying attention. So you see with the two brothers there, you actually see Moses as the Melchizedek, because what was Moses doing? Teaching everybody Torah. He was discipling the whole nation. Then he had the 70 under him that were then discipling. So the 70 were actually operating in the Melchizedek priesthood. Then you had Aaron and his children and the other Levites working in the Levitical priesthood, with Aaron and his children being the Kohanim, the high priest of that particular role of priesthood. Now, we don't have a temple, so at this point there's no need for a Levitical priesthood. Although we do have a temple that we know is coming. And guess what? In Ezekiel, there will be a Levitical priesthood in that temple. That doesn't diminish or change that there will still be a Melchizedek priesthood. There almost always were both running at the same time. They were almost always both running at the same time. Okay, so again, the need for the priesthood to be full-time. Because people say, oh, well, you just want the money because you just don't want to have a regular job. I would much rather have a regular job. It is so much easier, trust me. Because when you're done at the end of the day with your regular job, you're actually done. My job never is done. I could be working any moment all the time, including last night when I was just about into the bed at 1, which is early enough for me to be in, and I got a phone call that somebody was in need, and I had to get up and go to that until 3. So I didn't get in until 3:30, 3:45 last night. Because why? Because it's my job. It's my responsibility to be there. And so this is what we do. No complaint. I love my job. But I couldn't do it if nobody tithed. Abba provided for that. We have people in our ministry that are scattered around the world that are trying to lead congregations with secular jobs. I have no idea how they do that. We need to pray that they get the financial support to be full-time, because their group needs them to be. So you guys always think about, you just want my money because you want, no, not what I want, you need. You need me to be full-time. It's not I need. Trust me, there's a lot of times during the day when I walk around going to my wife or to Robert or the other ministry going, I don't need this. Look around you. We're not a very submissive, obedient group. If you're leading a not so very obedient, submissive group, it could be enough to make you say like Moses, "Hey, Abba, if there's anything I've ever done that pleases you, kill me, please." There's not someone in ministry that hasn't had that thought, trust me. I love you guys, but you're a handful. Okay? And trust me when I tell you, I'm not getting paid enough. That's not why we do the job. And when I say that, I don't care if it was $1 million. There's no paying enough for what the ministry has to do. It has to come from the heart. It's too hard a job. It's too emotional. It's too taxing and draining to put a price tag on it. You can't pay a person enough to do it. They have to do it because they're called to do it. Nobody should want this job. Trust me, I'm telling you from experience. I've been doing this job for a long time. I love the job, but I don't do the job because I want to. I do it because he's not letting me do anything else. This is what he has me doing. Okay, so that's the second time. Of course, the question was about the third, so we're going to get there in a second. Got to work our way to it. Okay? So then we see that there's a tithe that we're talking about at the end of chapter 14. Okay? And by the way, let me just kind of get to the feast calendar, tithing calendar, because this will make sense as we get into this part here with the third tithe. But for all of you with your second tithe, you've hopefully listened to the teaching I've done on making the calendar decision and also on the appointed times, where I've talked about that you have more than one calendar in your Bible. Okay, one is for counting months, and one is for counting feasts. Years. One is for counting months, which is your feast, and one for counting years. What am I talking about? The first month when we count for feasts is the month of Aviv, and you count to the 14th day of that month, right, and you have Passover. And so now we're in the 7th month of that calendar, the one when we count months. But there's also in chapter 25 of Leviticus an instruction about counting years. 7-year cycle, 50-year cycle, the Shemitah and the Yovel. Guess when that's counted? In Tishrei, in the 7th month after Atonement. You declare the year, the change of years. So the calendar, when we change years, is actually in the 7th month of the calendar that counts months. I know that sounds confusing. I didn't create this, okay? He said it. I just believe it. That's how it works. So the tithing calendar, which is for feasts, your tithing to go to feasts ends at the end of the last feast. So that means at the end of Sukkot and then Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day festival, your second tithe year ends. Whatever you had excess should be then put into the box because you should not keep it over or you won't tithe the next year. Think about it. If you had excess every year, eventually you just stop saying, well, I got extra. Why do I need to tithe this year? You would lose the obedience factor. So you start as soon as you get home after Shemini Atzeret, tithing for the next feast. Your tithe is to get you to each feast so you can enjoy each feast. That's the second tithe. Okay, so we make sure we cleared that up. Now, what it does talk about is that in every third year, this is now dealing with the Shemitah cycle, in year 3 and in year 6, he says that year, those are the years that you're going to have a tithe that's specifically for the widows, the orphans, and the poor. Wait a minute, we got one that nobody can touch. This goes to the Levites. We got one that's for me to enjoy and do whatever I want with. This one sounds different too. Can we agree that it does sound different? Okay, so now we got to figure out what to do with it. So what do we do with it? I believe that let me rephrase this. Have I not taught you to be a maximalist and not a minimalist? Okay. Maybe not since we've been here this last couple of days, but most of you have heard me say that. Because if I said earlier, if you do more, you will be safe. If you do less, you could be at risk. The safest way, in my opinion, to apply this is to have a third tithe in the 3rd and 6th year of a 7-year cycle that you put aside that's for benevolence, for the poor. That's the safest way to apply it. But you kidding me? I can't live on 100%. You want me to live on 90? Wait, whoa, no, you want me to live on 80? Whoa, now you want me to live on 70? I wish there was some of the guys that were here. I had to run to the kitchen and do some helping, but go find some of the people that do the 3 and find out how much better they're living on 70 than they ever lived on 100. Anybody want to raise their hand about that? Go find those people that can tell you that they live better on the 70 than the 100. It doesn't make any sense. But you know what you'll do? You'll fix all the leaks in your budget. You'll stop wasting money on things you don't need to waste, and Abba will bless you with things you never expected to come in. But you have to walk out on faith. Like when Richard gave his testimony that he shut down his business on Sabbath, and that was on faith, and then Abba gave him the abundance to make that work. You got to walk out on faith and do your tithing, and he will provide you with the abundance. Go talk to Steve Waffle. He'd love to tell you. He can't believe what he's making these months ever since he started tithing. And this is his first third tithe year, and he's just like giddy. I'm serious. He has his own business. He does contract work. And when he first did the first tithe, he couldn't believe he would say to me, you can't believe what I'm making in a month. Then he started the second tithe when he learned about that, and the same thing. Then when he came here today, well, not today, when he first showed up, he said, Rabbi, he says, just keep praying that this keeps happening because look at the size of this tithe, and then you do the math and know what I'm making now a month. Go ask him his testimony because he walked out on faith. And now he's in his first time doing third tithe, and he can't believe the blessing. Well, he can believe. He's learned to believe. Hopefully this is making some sense. I know it scares you. What does Deuteronomy 10:12 say? Fear him. Stop being afraid of everything else. Go back and listen to the Fear of Yahweh teaching. I told you the subtitle is, if you would fear Yahweh, you'll never be afraid of anything or anyone again. Why can't you trust him? But you don't understand. I've got bills and I've got debt and I've got, you're killing yourself financially. That's why you have all that. Start tithing, get your house in order, and let him give you the abundance. But the economy's getting worse. Then you have even more reason you better not skip your tithing because you need to make sure he's on your side financially. This is not because I need you. Abba's going to give us money for you. And if it's you or not, it doesn't matter to me. This is about you. Remember, I don't work for you. I work for him. If you supply some of the money, that's all well and good for you. You get a blessing for that or whatever. But if he wants to pay me, he owns all the cattle and all the hills and all the gold and everything else. He'll pay me somehow. So I'm not worried about me getting paid. I don't want you to think this sounds like those Christian ministries all trying to get your money. I don't want your money. He wants you to tithe so that he can use you to trust him to be a flow-through of his abundance so that you can bless and benefit other people. Is that making any sense? Okay, is this about this? All right, where's the mic? Okay, come around on this side first. Let's catch Nate first and then Ken. I don't know which one had his hand up first, but I saw Nate, so.
So about a year ago, a lot of you don't know this.
You got to put this right there.
When we got here, my wife and I my wife had divorce papers in her hand. And it had to do with one of our oldest children and how I am as far as most of you did the little color coding thing yesterday with the personalities. Hers is quite different than so we have trouble communicating. It wasn't the first time that this had happened. But on a whim, it was like, I'll give everything I got. I'll go down and I'll see this guy. And I wouldn't even call him rabbi when I came down here because I was very against leadership. But I'll give it, I love my wife and my family that much, and I love our king that much that I didn't want to disappoint him, and I wanted to make sure that we gave it every shot. And thankfully, we sat down with him for a few minutes, and he nipped it right in the butt because he doesn't pull any punches. Okay? And surprisingly enough, we were able to recover from that. And there has been times through this last year where we have had to call him or talk to him or whatever to kind of get, and it's been easier and easier and easier as time goes on about overcoming the issues that both of us have from where we came from, wherever we came out of. And I am so thankful that he was there. He wasn't working full time. And if you know me, I was very adamant about leadership. Now, you can think of how I felt about tithing, because that went right with it. And at that time, at that year, when I started saying, this somehow, some way, Abba used this guy to help us get to where we are, I started tithing. I started putting my money where my mouth is. Now, I wish I was as diligent about second tithe as I have been about first tithe. And I'm learning. I'm coming out of that. So this year, a little harder to be more second tithe and prayerfully third as well. Because I do know about those things. I have not been diligent. So, Abba, I ask your forgiveness. And those of you that are around me can maybe support and encourage me in those things. But it's because of his freedom that he was able to counsel us in these times of need at any hour of the day. And also in tithing, I could go on and on about the tithing, about how Abba has allowed us to purchase our house outright with 5 acres and 2,000 square feet. With money I had no idea that I had hidden somewhere in a VA thing. I could go on about how Abba has blessed us financially. And so, speaking to this, I just want to encourage those of you who are either listening or are here about rebellion against leadership or tithing and all that. If you have a moment, I would love to come and share with you our testimonies about those things. But like he said, it's not about who he is, it's about who he is serving and how he is being a tool to be used to serve us. But then we also need to reciprocate that, just like everything in Torah, bringing it back around so that our Abba can continue to make the cycle complete. Amen.
Amen. Appreciate that. Okay, before you go to Ken, let me just say this, just so that to reiterate a little bit. They were very adamant that they had no interest in leadership. They were just here to have a Sukkot. It was really a last chance to just have a family before there was going to be a divorce, and so the family could be together one last time. It was because of one family that had already experienced some of this that absolutely begged them to give me a chance to talk to them, and they were willing to do that. But I will tell you that after the first conversation, because if you ever counsel with me, you'll see I try to be gentle and understanding, but if you're going to throw nonsense out, I'm going to call it what it is. And so after that first night, I walked past your wife, who stopped me and looked at me, and she said, I don't like you, but I'm listening. I said, good. She did. She stopped me as I was walking past her in the dining hall while we were, during a meal, and she just looked me in the eye, but she had a half smile. But she goes, I don't like you, but I am listening. I said, that's all it takes. You don't have to like me, but allow me an opportunity. Okay, so I appreciate that a lot. Now, just to be clear before we get to Ken, just functionally, now that I've told you about second tithe, I really understand I might give you some grief if you are here now and you don't have any real legitimate reason to not be financially able to come to Passover, because you're going to tell me, well, I don't know if I can afford to come. Well, have you been tithing? No. You've been told. See, but you're real easy and quick for some of you to go, well, can the ministry help me out? Well, did you do your part? We can help people out. We have probably, and this is not any kind of pat on the back, we probably have over $3,000 or $4,000 worth of benevolence being put out right now at this feast. Okay? Now, a lot of that was provided by you guys who said, I have some extra, can you use that for somebody? So I'm not trying to get any praise or credit, but we do benevolence is my point. But the point is, I will be tough on you to find out, is it because you really had crisis and need and just couldn't do it? Or is it because you just weren't diligent? You didn't trust Yahweh to put away the tithe. Because some of you have no problem making sure you get Starbucks and eating out and cable and all the other things that you do, rather than make sure you can go enjoy a feast with your Father in heaven who wants to be here with you. Okay? So just be careful with that. One last thing, and I'll get to Ken. The tithe we didn't mention, because it is on the 3rd and the 6th year, people will say, well, how do I know when the year's, how to count that? So the wisdom I believe I was given, and this could be wrong, but I just felt like this is what Abba was giving me, was tell them to start counting from when they became aware of it. Because we don't know when the Shemitah and Jubilees are. I know that people out there think they do, but they don't. I'm not saying they're wrong. They're just guessing. Maybe it's a good educated guess. Maybe they figured out. I can tell you nobody really knows. But if you start counting when you become aware of it, okay? So if you just became aware of it now, when we get out of here and we go after Sukkot, that starts your year one. That's year one of your count, okay? The year you find out about it, if you find out about it, let's say some of you are going to meet people that are going to find out about it in December. Well, that's so new to the year. Let that still be year one. If you find out about it in September, right before a feast, that's not really year one. You don't need to speed up the cycle. Wait till after the feast, that's year one. And you can counsel about that. That's my opinion. I feel that's what the Ruach gave me as wisdom for that count it from when you found out about it. If this is when you first found out about it, this is year one right after we get out of here. Okay? Was this a question about what I just said? No, wait, I just want to make, is this about? Okay, so the question then was, can you use leftover feast money for orphans and widows? If you have benevolence that you know is a place that you can put it, you need to not let it stay in your hands. The feast money that's left over cannot be a temptation not to continue to get your second tithe. Now, also with third tithe and benevolence, you may think, well, I don't know who to help. Well, mostly the people took the third tithe and brought it to the Levite and went into the storehouse because they're the ones who people call and say, I have a need. So what you do is you mark your donation or you mark your tithe that you send in as third tithe. And we put that to the person that calls us next who has a need. So we're going to know about it more likely than you are. Also, we are less likely to get fooled. Some of you have very, very big hearts. And there are people out there that take very easy advantage of that. So before you start helping people, ask for counsel first, because there may be things you need to find out first. Like I had my first situation where this came up. I wasn't even the leader of the congregation, but I just started there as a Torah teacher. And the leader asked me a question. What's your opinion? We have a lady that needs help paying her rent. I said, is there any more information than that? What else is going on? She smokes 4 packs a day. I say, fine, I will give her what she needs. If it was up to me, I would give her what she needs after she stops smoking, because otherwise I'm paying for her cigarettes. I'm not saying that someone has to quit smoking. I'm not getting involved in that. But don't ask me to pay your rent when you haven't done everything you need to do first. Okay, you should not be coming to ask for Abba's money unless you've done everything else first. So if you're still enjoying cable and you still have all these other things that are luxuries, why are you coming and asking for anything? You need to get your own finances straight. Maybe you just need counsel on how to fix your finances. I happen to have a background in that. If you call me, I can help you. Okay? I've got a financial planning background, and I know how to do those things. Find somebody who does. But don't come to the ministry first. You should be coming to the ministry last. Does that make any sense? But the ministry should help you. Some of you have had terrible experiences where you tithe, then you had a need and the ministry wouldn't help. We will help you. But first we're going to help you figure out whether or not it's your fault that you're having the problem so we can fix that problem. Does that make sense? We're not just going to keep throwing fish at you without teaching you how to go fish. All right, or find there's a hole in the boat where you're putting the fish and the fish keep falling back in the water. So hopefully we got that right. Okay, Ken.
So I have a question and just a comment.
Okay, if you move the mic around, it's not going to work. Keep it right there.
So the question was, it was more like a clarification on when to start the year thing, and you touched on it a little bit, but it was more like if you did like every 3 Sukkots, as soon as you're done Sukkot, start tithing for that year after that, right? And that would be the 3rd up until that Sukkot. Or the next Sukkot, I mean.
Okay, all tithe-related years go from the end of Sukkot to the end of Sukkot.
Okay.
Okay, all tithe-related years start when you get home from Sukkot. When Sukkot is over, the tithing is now for that next year. The first tithe is something you just do no matter what year it is. The second tithe is from feast to feast. It starts after Sukkot. The third tithe would be in the same thing because it's part of the Shemitah cycle. And Israel, even though it was declared after atonement, really didn't start doing those things until, because they were in the middle of all those feasts, until after Sukkot. So really, after Sukkot really starts all the cycles. Okay? Did that answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay, what else you got?
And so the comment was that a lot of people talk about tithing and then getting back being blessed in finances. And one of the things that there's many different ways you can be blessed. One of the things that we didn't think about, because I had like a really slow winter, and so we were tithing faithfully, and then what happened was that the Creator put it on the hearts of people that we fellowship with to actually pay for some of our groceries, or to give us groceries. Sorry, and so. That's another type of blessing you can get. It's not always going to be bigger paychecks.
Amen. Amen. I hope we all heard that point. We'll get to you right in a second. The blessing that you receive isn't necessarily the health and wealth gospel guy saying if you put more money in, you get more money back. You get blessed in other ways. You know, we're funny people, okay? And I can use this story because my wife knows I've told this story many times. You know, when we started in the ministry, I'm the type of person that if you need something and don't have, I'll just happily give it to you. So right when the scriptures first came out, 98, 99, I had the scriptures, and we met somebody who was just passing through town, visited the congregation, and wanted the scriptures, didn't have any money. And I went to the car to get one to give the person the scriptures. And my wife looked at me and said, well, you know they're never going to send us anything or do anything. I said, yes, I know that. I said, but if I'm giving, I don't worry about reaping the harvest where I'm giving or where I'm planting. See, we as human beings like to plant, and then we hover over going, come on. There's 20 feet of harvest behind you that you're ignoring completely, but you're sitting there hovering over it. Come on, grow. I planted right here. And you're missing the point. He's been blessing you abundantly in other ways because of your obedience. So that's a great point, Ken, for bringing that out, because I usually say that kind of thing, and you triggered that, so I can remember to say that, is that you may get what you need in other areas and lessons to learn because of the obedience. It doesn't mean necessarily money, okay? But what I meant by the money part is at least you can hopefully be confident that he will provide your needs. You can afford to do this. That's the point. No, tithing isn't going to make you a millionaire necessarily. My point is that if you tithe, he'll make sure that you can function, that you can live and joyfully, abundantly, and not be under a financial crunch. But also, it's the tithing that helps you be aware of your finances. Some of you have awful finances, right? And you need to plug all those leaks and look at what you're spending. And so maybe the tithing is what gets your attention. Dale.
You probably get this a lot, and you may clarify. You talk about appointed and anointed. Steve, who appointed you, and who are you in accountability to as leadership over you other than Yah?
Okay, good question. Not an easy one for me to answer, but good question. Okay, so first and foremost, I'll take the second part first. We at MTOI have a leadership council. And it's got over, I guess, about 12 or so people in it, okay? It's all of the people that are in any kind of leadership and connected with the, affiliated with MTOI. We meet on an every 2-week basis, almost every 2 weeks. So figure out 26 times a year we could meet. We probably meet about 20 to 22 times, so almost every other week. And I have accountability to all of them. They are there to be the eyes and ears of like those that they are representing in their groups that they fellowship with, and everybody else to say we're watching the decisions that they're watching decisions that I'm making. So from accountability point of view, they're not a bunch of yes men. They're not a bunch of people I picked and appointed. There's a very stringent criteria to be in the leadership council. You ready for this? They've got to be leading something and participating in MTOI. That was tough. So they get to then be in the meetings where we talk about everything we're doing. They get to ask any questions they want. They can share any concerns they want. And if they ever see me doing anything that greatly concerns them, they have total freedom to go share it with everybody else. after they've gone through the proper channels of trying to rectify things according to Scripture. Does that make sense? So there's accountability from that point of view. That's number one. As far as the anointed appointeds, the discipleship question is tough for me because I don't want to sound like a hypocrite when I tell everybody they need to be trained and taught and instructed. And they do. But at some point, as you go back the chain ends, unless there's been a continuous flow all the way back to Yeshua, which some claim there is, but there really, very few people can say that there's any way to say that I've been trained by someone who was trained by someone all the way straight back to Yeshua. And so with my starting in this position, the anointing and appointing has to come from you observing and asking of the Ruach, because what makes, let's deal with the rabbi thing for a second, not the whole do not call, but just what makes somebody a leader teacher is that you should be the ones acclaiming that person to be, not them acclaiming themselves to be. So as people have asked me, well, what makes you a rabbi? Nothing, except the people I was teaching decided I was their rabbi because I was doing the things that role does. Okay? So do I have a teacher? No. Would I like to have one? Absolutely. I wish that I was not the top of the chain in this particular chain. But I haven't been put in any place where I could find one that would be the one I'm supposed to work with. I've got peers. I've got really good friends who are peers, like Rico Cortez, good friend of mine. We are accountability partners. We have told each other, if you ever see me doing, he said it to me and I said it to him, if you ever see me doing anything that's out in left field, you grab a hold of me and say, what are you doing? What's up with that? We have told each other, you are free to do that. I have other teacher accountability partners like that. But as far as anointing and appointing, it's kind of like this. How many of you know how to play piano, but you're not anointed at it, if you know what I'm saying? Okay, so if I took you and put you up at the keyboard, which is missing, if I took you and put you up at the keyboard, you can play, and then if I took somebody that was anointed and have them play, would you hear a difference? If they played the exact same song, would you hear a difference? Okay, that's really what matters for anointing, appointing, because who the teacher is part of it to some degree. But have we all been in a congregation with a person with I forgot the letters for it, but they've got the doctorate of philosophy right there, the ones who went to seminary, okay? All right, they've gone to seminary, and they had no gifting whatsoever. Have you ever been in front of a congregation like that? Okay? They got up there, they got in front of the mic, and you were like, ooh, this is going to be rough. They got the degree, they got the training. So it's not just about the training. They need the training, but it's not just about the training. That doesn't mean they have the anointing. They could still be self-anointed, thinking that they have a gift they don't have. Look, I hate to use an American Idol as an example, but how many times you see the person that would audition for one of those shows and act completely stupefied and shocked that someone would tell them they can't sing? Because they don't know that they're not anointed in that area. Everybody around them's told them how wonderful they are, but it's been unfair to them what people did to them. It wasn't the unfairness of the judge telling them they can't sing. It was wrong of everybody their whole life not telling them they can't sing. In a nice way, obviously, to say, look, this is just not your gift, but enjoy it and do it. Look, we've got a couple of people in the congregation locally who are completely 100% tone deaf. And I enjoy one of them in particular when he sings better than almost anybody in the room, because he is so in that moment singing full blown, full blast, and misses every note. Won't tell you who it is. But I enjoy, and I would never tell him to stop singing. But I wouldn't put him in front of the team and the microphone and put him in a place where he would embarrass himself thinking he's good when he's not. Does that make sense? So really, I've said this over and over, it's for you to go out and look for and listen to and experience and taste of different teachers to find the anointed, appointed you're supposed to be working with. And it's not by pedigree and credential per se. Now, the problem is we have some people that are very talented out there that have never gone and gotten retooled, retrained, who are still teaching Christian formatted Torah. So in other words, it's got Torah observance in Christian doctrine. Positionally, they still see through the Christian filters. They could be worrying about post, pre, and whatever trib. They could be worrying about, going to heaven when you die. They could be worrying about grace from the wrong perspective on grace. They could be all about Trinitarianism. They're looking through their Christian filters. Because what most of them did was change their mechanics. They went from Sunday to Saturday. They went from Christmas and Easter to the feasts. They stopped eating pork and shellfish. All right, I'm perfect now. No, you've got a whole bunch of stuff in terms of the mindset that you still got to figure out and undo. That takes years. And these guys never put down the mic. I never was trained in that stuff, so that stuff doesn't make me better than anybody. I just didn't have to undo that. Never had it, okay? So that's not a big patting myself on the back. I just thank Abba I didn't have to unlearn all that stuff. Boy, that would be hard. I can only imagine. I watch people struggle with, because when they counsel with me, we bang heads on that stuff all the time. And I keep saying to them, that's the Christianity you won't let go of. That's the Christian thinking you're not letting go of. And they look at me like, what are you talking about? Because it's so part of them, they don't even see it. They can't even see it. So hopefully that answers your question to some degree. It's a hard question to answer because I don't have that. I wish I did, because then I would be able to answer that question more easily, saying, here's my teacher. But I don't. Abba called me when he did, had me start doing what I'm doing, and never put me in front of anybody that I could have that with. So I pray that in some rare cases, and I'm certainly not trying to be prideful ego, the Ruach just grabs a hold of that person and gives them the words. And that's up to you to see if that's true. It's not up to me to claim. So I'm not claiming anything. Does that make sense? Is that fair? I'm not claiming anything. You are sitting there listening. You got to decide if this is where you're supposed to be and who you're supposed to listen to. That's your job. I'm just up here saying the best I can what I think I'm supposed to say. Whether you receive it and what you do with it, that's purely in your hands. Where's the mic now? Okay, in the back, Rachel.
This is not exactly on what you're on right now, so if you want to say, wait, that's fine. But what I did when the time passed and I couldn't get anybody's attention, I prayed and asked Abba if somebody needed this comment, that he would bring the mic back or bring attention to it.
Okay, David, did you want to talk about this? This thing that I'm just talking about? Okay, let David go first and we'll get back to you. Go ahead,
Okay.
David.
Specifically in regards to your teacher, you didn't just one day wake up and decide to do this. You, with Hebrew school and being taught and inculcated with the
Right, I've
precepts
had lots
of Torah,
of teachers.
You
I
had
didn't
lots
just
of
wake
teachers.
up out of nowhere, right?
Right.
Right. I had lots of teachers. I have had lots of teachers. I've watched immense amount of teachings. As a matter of fact, is Robert in here? No. But if you would ask Robert, or if you would ask my wife, if you ask people that sit in my office and have been with me, I am listening to teachings almost every day. I've got things that I'm listening to, just looking for that one little nugget or one little thing, not but that I'm making them my teachers, but I'm always wanting to get more information to allow the Ruach to show me what I'm supposed to be working with you. Most of the information I'm giving is not that saying I'm getting it from other people. I'm not saying I'm plagiarizing, but I'm always open to correction and understanding. So I'm listening to stuff all the time. Okay? Now, a lot of what I'm listening to, I have responsibility because they're teachers that work with us, and I have to listen to what they're teaching so that I can give feedback. But I'm not that guy that's the dangerous guy that sits there on the top of the mountain and nobody doesn't listen to anybody, never talks to anybody, and is not open to anything. By the way, we're a half hour late already for lunch. Go ahead.
I got to go back to tithing. A lot of real questions on this. The third tithe's got everyone confused. Some are asking, is it I do 20%, and in the third year I do extra 10%?
Yes.
Or is it 10, 10, 10 all the way through? Which way is it?
20, 20, 30. 20, 20, 30. Then you get the extra year off with the seventh year, and you start again counting with the year one. Then it goes 20, 20, 30. Percent off, that's your tithing. You're doing 2 tithes every year. In the third year, you're doing 3. Okay? Okay. In other words, in the Shemitah year, you're counting every third year. The seventh year off is for the third tithe. When you're counting the third tithe, year 1, year 2, third tithe. 4, 5, 6, third tithe. Then you start again, 7, 1, 2, 3. So it's a little bit longer gap between 6 and 3. Do you understand what I'm saying? But it's in the third year. It's on a Shemitah cycle. So you have year 3 and year 6. And then you have actually a 4-year gap there because then you have 7, 1, 2, 3. The first and second tithe is every year, every year, every year. Every year you need ministry, and every year you need to go to feasts. The third tithe is counted on the third and sixth year of the 7-year cycle. Okay. Rachel. And then we got to...
Then we get to eat?
Well, or we could just keep going straight into the services at 3 o'clock.
Okay, I'll make it quick.
I can do this. It doesn't bother me at all.
You were talking about the CDs that came out of Christianity and what they mean to you. And if you love it, you know, the thought occurred to me that it's a principle. When you really love something, it has a greater impact on you than if you just have a casual interest. It can damage you more if you really love it and it's not in line with where Abba wants you.
Amen. That's why we did the heart of the matter teaching, which is only 64 parts. It's not much of a commitment, but how many of you have done the whole 64 parts? All right, put your hands down. How many of you have done it twice? I know there's a few of you. Okay, how many have done it 3 times? 4? Nobody. Okay, but you got the 3 in there. I know, and a couple of you did. Very good job. And there's Mr. Steve. I told him, I gave him your tithing testimony, like how you just can't even believe what Abba's been doing since you started first, second, and third tithing.
That's why I wanted to talk about the third. We just finished doing the third. And I'll tell you what, that and kind of connects with the Deuteronomy 8:2 thing again as well, because I wanted my son with me. And when I thought Yahweh was taking him away from me, sending him to California, I couldn't understand why he was pouring so much work I probably couldn't do my son. And then by the time this feast ended up, I'm not going to boast, but it was almost a 4-figure tithe check for each first, second, third was my final tithe check, was almost 4 figures for a 2-week period. And that was because Abba blessed me with the work I needed. And that was part of, I think, was he wanted me to love him more, even though he took my son. So I was pushed in, and because I pushed into that, he blessed me with the work and gave me the work that I needed to kind of refocus where I needed to have my focus. And when I first chose Rabbi as my mentor and my leader, it went off the chart again as well. I remember one month was a significant 1 month, one house. This doctor called me and says, "Hey, I bought a new house. This is what I want done." I told him how much. He says, "Okay." Wrote the check, and that was it. And it's like, what? And it was, and then before I knew it, this just kept on coming. So it's, Amen. If you don't do, Amen. We're back to 2 now after Sukkot, but it's really a blessing. We never, not 1 month, not had what we needed and a little extra.
Amen. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that.
Now it's
And by the way, to go sort of the Dale's question and some of the questions about leadership, find people like Steve, like Nate, and others that will just ask people, have you, for whatever reason, decided that this is your teacher? And then ask them why. Okay, so Nate just says he has a whole list of why he's done that. Because that would answer the question better. Okay? Why? Because the why is not just because the teachings are good. Because having a relationship with the teacher is a lot more than just listening to something on CD or on YouTube or something else. It's the person in the relationship. Remember what I said, everything's relational, right? It's about the relationships. And in those relationships, you should be able to discover, is that person anointed and appointed for being the one that you're supposed to be with? And if it's not, you need to go find the one you're supposed to be with. Okay? Dale, one last question. Where's the mic? Give Dale a question.
So on that, if you're red and you're not blue, how do we have a relationship with you?
Hold on. All of you that have related with me, almost none of them are red. They're all blue. or good or blue white or yellow. And everything. In my role, when I'm doing my job, I can be whatever you need in that situation, because that's what red is. Red's lead and accomplish tasks, and so I can shift into those gears, because that's something that's what you do when you're doing your job. It's the red can do that. I can be compassionate. I can be gentle. I can be kind. I can be strong. I can cut through whatever needs to be done there, because then it's coming from the task-oriented. Back to the colors, right? From the task-oriented, results-oriented place. I think that's what Paul meant, by the way, when he says, I can be all things to all people. I think he was talking about the color code.
Can I respond?
Go ahead.
Can I respond?
Sure.
Obviously, being on the other side of the world, I find that very hard.
You find what hard?
I need to be in relationship with you, but I don't feel that. Because
the distance is too great.
Well, distance, and because you are red, it's predominant. And I've seen that. And this week, it's dawned on me that there are other men here that are blue, and I relate better to them. Now, that works, but if you're going to be my mentor, well, that's where I find that breaks down, because it's not your natural disposition. And that alarms me a little bit.
Okay, wait, hold on. Some hands just went up that want to respond to that. So, wait, give it a Kurt first.
But part of learning the color code is to learn the deficiencies in your understanding and everyone else's, and you grow within that so you can adapt to the other people's colors and know how to communicate with them.
In other words, just because we're different in our personalities, it doesn't make it a natural fit. It means both of us will have to work to adjust. By the way, how many of you've already been here for a day or two, have already found some people you've never met before that, boy, you just so click with them and it's just awesome? How many of you met a few people, you still love them just as much, but it just didn't sort of click? That's going to happen with ministry too. You see? Who has the mic? Okay, Ken.
So I have a similar story as Nate there, but it's much more condensed. And so, like, as far as like Rabbi's ability to adapt to circumstances, like the first teaching I saw for him was the Beware False Prophets. It was about an hour before I met him. And and I was like, wow, this guy's incredible. It's incredibly intense. And so when I went there, I challenged him a whole bunch, and we were up fairly late at night. And one of the things I noticed when I was challenging him, and you can see how strong he is on the mic and delegating and stuff like that. But when we were one-on-one in person, and actually even in a little small group, the fruits of the Spirit were pouring out of this guy. Like, it was... Like, I can't even imagine how many times he's been asked Matthew 23:8, and if it was me, I would probably lose my mind and start, attacking.
That's the don't call anybody rabbi verse, right?
And so, and he never did that. And so then I basically stalked him for the next 24 hours and went from house to house in our group, and then we ended up going riding in the van back to the airport with him. And I was like, I need you to be my rabbi, because like what I saw was. I
appreciate that. Okay, so what he's saying that in almost a 24-hour period, he went through the same thing you did in a lot longer period. But when he met me, we were at a meeting in Alberta, okay, and in Canada. He had just only seen the Beware False Prophets teaching. He came from a place of not really interested in leadership, and certainly wasn't going to call anybody rabbi. But he stayed until like 2 in the morning. What was it, 5? It was 5 in the morning. Okay, after everybody else left, it was question after question after question after question, and that's where it comes from. And so it's not so much that our personalities have to match, is that are you getting the answers and the questions answered? Now, I know it's been a little harder for you to reach me lately, but we've had a lot of the other times where we've had a lot of time, and I've had a lot of time with Lisa as well, with your wife as well, where we get to communicate, and stuff. Ollie and I have not really gotten to talk too much, but that's okay. We can have that work out. There are going to be more natural fits. Just because it's not a natural fit doesn't mean the person can't be your teacher. As a matter of fact, that may be exactly what you need, is someone that's not a natural fit. Okay? Because I can promise you, when I work with Dawn, she doesn't like a lot of the way I handle things with her. But she's come to respect it. And so we can bang heads every now and then, or often, and I can say, but Dawn. And that's not picking on her. there's not a natural fit there. But at some point, you get to say, I need to adjust and realize, and we're both trying to adjust to each other. So I start to recognize what works for you and how to communicate to you. The more I get to know you, the more I'll be able to communicate with you in the way that's most effective with you. Sometimes it's a natural, easy thing because we're similar, or sometimes it's not so natural because we're not similar. But that doesn't make you the right teacher. The right teacher is when the Father says, like you said, he just keeps bringing you back to that person. He's giving you what you need. He's giving you the things that the Ruach is saying, yes, this is the one, even though that person may not make you comfortable. Because like in your wife, she said, I don't like you, but I'm listening. She likes me now. Don't get me wrong. Okay? Because when we were talking the other day and he said I was his rabbi, she was going, you're my rabbi. She was doing one of these. Did you see her doing that? She's like, my rabbi. Okay? It's the distance really for us. So you got to move here. Not that easy. Well, you're in Australia. It's a little bit tough. I am planning to go to New Zealand. Hopefully I can still do Australia as part of that, and then I can see you again when I go there. Okay, but right now I don't have as many people there wanting me to come over. I know you guys do, but I need a little bit bigger group to try to make it work.
My observation of what was going on here about personality conflicts and everything else like that, when we were called out and woke up to Torah, we woke up to a journey. It's not an instant change. Repentance or teshuvah is a journey. And we live for decisions. That's the reason why we're still living. Otherwise, we would all be saved. And
I should do a teaching about that.
You did. So the point is that when we have personality conflicts, especially with leadership, what we're expected to do by Abba, I believe, 100%, is that we're supposed to work those things out through Torah with the fruit of the Ruach HaKodesh. And that's the end of my comment on that.
Appreciate it. Look, you know, some of you have these problems in your marriages because you come to realize you don't match as well as you thought you did when you first got married. But you know what? Maybe that's exactly what you needed, to learn to grow and adjust. And same thing can be with the teacher. It could be that you have a teacher that's going to stretch you and not make you. Listen, it's not my concern to make you happy and comfortable. I want you to successfully get to the kingdom, however that works. If we can have you be happy and like me and everything else, that's all nice and like icing on the cake, so to speak. But my main concern is to get you what you need to know and need to do and approach so that you can get to the door and get in the kingdom. That's my job, is to safely, that's a shepherd, right? The shepherd gets the sheep safely from point A to point B. And that's what I'm trying to do. Sam.
Okay, just a little quick note here about the whole personality thing. And honestly, I think I'm probably one of the few people who was like this with you. One of our first conversations after I took the personality test, you smacked me across the face pretty much as hard as you could, and I couldn't have been any happier with it, in all honesty. And it's just one of those things.
I don't remember, so it's okay.
Well, no. Well, it was because I'm almost complete red myself, and you're just like, you laid it out, and you're just like, you're following me now. I'm just like, okay, I'm okay with this. I'm not going to fight at all here. But just for other people, for anyone who does want to communicate with the red, don't be afraid to give us a whack. In all honesty, there's a good chance we'll actually listen to you better if you do.
Amen. I think what it had to do with, because of what you just said in the hint there, is that if you're in discipleship, not just a student in a classroom with a teacher, but discipleship, you've chosen that person to disciple you for a reason, because you believe they can get you from where you are to where you're trying to go. Then when you're discipling with that person, I can promise you that it doesn't work if you're going to argue. You can discuss, you can disagree, but if you are my student under a discipleship role, if I say this needs to happen or stop happening, and you start arguing with me, I'll say, you need to stop arguing, or you need to go somewhere else, because this is not discipleship. We've talked about it. I've made a decision. That's kind of where we were, right? Okay. And I said, that's fine. You don't have to disciple. You can just go listen to teachers, do whatever you want. But if you're going to ask me to take that responsibility, like becoming my son, okay, that's the kind, like becoming my family, and I'm now responsible on that level, we're not going to argue. I will listen. We will discuss. This is not a dictatorship either. It's a relationship that you asked to be in. It's not a cultish thing. You must ask a discipler to disciple you, and they have to decide if they want to or not. That's the way it's always worked through the centuries. It was very common in Yeshua's day. Tons of discipling going on. There was a teacher. Somebody would want to say, teacher, would you teach me? Teacher would have to decide, do I want that burden of responsibility to take that person on and really teach them? But I can't teach you. Nobody can teach you if you're going to argue. Remember, arguing is not disagreement and kind of going back and forth and saying, I'm not really getting this. Arguing is once a decision is made, you're going to fight against it. And there can't be any arguing. So if you're not ready for that relationship, don't enter into that relationship. And I think that was the nature of the discussion. Okay? And so, because that was the person's choice. It wasn't my choice. I didn't come up to you and say, you need to listen to me. None of you need to listen to me. But if you ask me to be your discipler, then you're going to need to listen. Okay? Because if I'm going to be responsible, I don't want to be responsible because I told you and you did whatever you wanted. Okay? If I'm going to be responsible, I want to make sure that is what I said. So then I could stand up and explain why I said what I said. Does that make sense? Okay? I don't want this to sound like controlling, dictatorial, or cultish. You don't have to disciple with me or anybody else. That's your choice. But if you're going to, you should know why you're doing it and what it means. And before you do, we have that discussion. We did. And I said, do you understand what this is? Okay? Discipleship is not just a teacher and a student. It's a different relationship. I hope you saw that with Messiah with his disciples. It's a different relationship. In his day, what disciples would literally do is move into the house with their discipler. They would watch how they ate, how they breathed, how they slept, how they talked to people, how they did their work. They'd watch everything. They'd learn from every interaction they had with anybody. They would learn from that person, how they walked, how they acted, everything that they did. It was that kind of a thing. It was like going around in the back pocket. Okay? A few people have asked to do that with me here. I said, you better have running shoes because I move fast. All right, we're really going long. Go ahead, Hugo.
Just to relate a little bit with Dale. So, yes, I can relate with you. To get the warm and fuzzies from Rabbi, you won't get it. But that's why I say, don't look for it there. Look for it amongst fellow disciples, the warm and fuzzies, and then get the direction from there. We all get direction from there and the discipling, but then the warm and fuzzies between each other. We have had counselors, my wife and I, and we get the compassion in the individual counseling session. It is there.
Right, and he's doing this from BC, which is not as far as Australia, but it's pretty far. Okay, so it still requires Skyping or something so we could do things. All right? Kara.
I just want to say, because we're all talking about the colors right now, I think Abba created you with all of that red for a very good reason, because there are things that you can handle that, okay, a blue, for example, would absolutely lose their mind. It's a tough job, and obviously that means that there's other things that don't come naturally, but that's the thing with the colors. It doesn't mean that you have to be compartmentalized necessarily. You can grow in different areas, but I just have to say, like, even when you're upset or you're scolding about something, you just look so at home. Sometimes I just look at Trish and I'm like, oh, look at Rabbi. He's so in his element right now. So, but that's a good thing. It's good. That's what he created you to do. He's created each of us in different ways to be able to help each other in different ways.
Amen. I appreciate that. Really appreciate it. Anybody else so we can go ahead and end? Okay, go ahead and say that. That's fine. Okay, Hugo has been and his wife have been very concerned about trying to reach out to some of the isolated and those that are lonely and because they live far away and away from people. And so they have started doing certain things to reach out on a weekly basis on a schedule with people in different countries, in different places, and build those relationships. And so
I thought maybe for people who do feel, when you get home, isolated, lonely, and you need fellowship and visiting, that we get together at an opportune time. I thought maybe today after lunch, but how it's gone today, maybe not today. Yeah. So maybe tomorrow after lunch, we can change that around. Maybe we can get together, share notes, and just decide how best to deal with that.
Okay, so tomorrow we have the mikvah after lunch, but we can figure this out. We'll make an announcement so people that would like to be more developing some fellowship and context with people that are also sort of scattered and isolated, we can do something with that.
I think that's great, but I think we need to think about the live stream. They're isolated there. I come from there, and I always thinking about them, and they need something like that.
Yeah, and that's so get in touch with us, because Hugo has been very good. You know, he started doing that with some of the people in South Africa. The next thing you know, we have over 150 contacts in South Africa, and now we're going to be flying out there in November, just because he comes from there originally. And so from being from South Africa, he has a heart for that. Next thing you know, he found them on the live stream and started connecting with people. We want to connect everybody up as best we can. And that's why we do the live stream, to give something that can bring some sort of connection. All right, let's go ahead and close this up. All right. I want to get somebody to close this up. Let's give, who wants to close this up? Get a volunteer. Okay, give it to Nate.
Abba, our Father, our King, our Sovereign, the one who watches over his flock, we thank you and we praise you for the mercy that you bestow upon us as you teach us how to walk in grace through your Son, Yeshua. And we're thankful for our teacher that we have here today, that you allow him to not only encourage us, but also to help to guide and direct us, to help us to get from where we were, where we are now, and prayerfully into your kingdom when that time comes. We thank you and praise you for this time of feast time, that you allow us to come together, that we can learn to get close to one another with our different colors, our different attitudes, our different way of approaching things, that iron sharpens iron, that you are the oil, that your Ruach are the oil that helps us to get closer together, even though we're a little different. We have you to lean on, and we have a leader to help us to get through the tough times when we're not able to rub against each other so well. We thank you and praise you for your feast. We thank you and praise you that you give us instructions. You don't leave us alone to wander about the world without any hope in the world, but you give us instructions, and that you allow us to have a teacher to help us to get through those instructions and walk them out according to the way that you intend them, not in our own eyes. So, Abba, as we get ready to enter into lunch, we pray, Abba, that we would still continue to think of you as we sit by the way, as we walk by the way, as we sit in our house, as we lie down and as we rise down, and as we feast together, that we would always bring you to the forefront of our hearts and our minds. We thank you and praise you for this time. In Yeshua's name.
Amen. Amen. All right, so we're going to have services in a little over an hour and a half. So we need to go eat and then come right back and have services. Because services starts at 3 or 3:30, I forget. 3? 3:30, right?